Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Dark Harry. We are thrilled to present today's story: What if Snape kept his promise to Lily and actually protected Harry? Redemption arc. If these stories bring joy to your day, please consider liking and subscribing. Every bit of support helps us continue this passion project. Now, prepare yourself for an amazing tale. Chapter 1, The Promise Kept. The night Lily Potter died, Severus Snape's world shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Severus appeared on the edge of Godric's Hollow with a crack that split the night air. His heart hammered against his ribs as he sprinted down the lane, black robes billowing behind him. The Dark Mark had burned an hour ago, summoning all Death Eaters to celebrate some momentous victory. But Severus knew. He'd known the moment Dumbledore's Patronus had found him, its silvery light dimming as it delivered the news he dreaded for months. The Potter cottage stood in ruins. One side of the upper floor had been blown apart, leaving the interior exposed to the night sky. Magical residue still crackled in the air, dark, powerful, and unmistakable. "No," Severus whispered, stumbling through the broken gate. His foot caught on something, James Potter's wand, abandoned on the path. The front door hung from a single hinge. Inside, James Potter lay sprawled at the foot of the stairs, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Severus stepped over him without a second glance and took the stairs two at a time, following the trail of destruction. "Lily," he called, his voice breaking. "Lily." The nursery door had been blasted apart. Through the settling dust, he saw her, a splash of deep red hair against the pale carpet, her body curled protectively toward the crib. Severus fell to his knees beside her. "Lily, no." His fingers brushed her cooling cheek. Her green eyes, those eyes he'd loved since childhood, stared emptily at nothing. A small sound broke through his grief, a whimper from the crib. Harry Potter sat among scattered toys and debris, his small face tear-streaked and confused. A jagged cut in the shape of a lightning bolt marred his forehead, still seeping blood. The boy looked up, and Severus felt his breath catch. Lily's eyes looked back at him from James Potter's face. "Mama?" the child asked, reaching chubby hands toward his mother's body. Something cracked inside Severus's chest. He reached for the boy instinctively, then froze as footsteps thundered up the stairs. Hagrid's massive frame filled the broken doorway, his bearded face wet with tears. "Merlin's beard." "Snape. What are ye doin' here?" Severus stood abruptly, composing his features into a cold mask. "I came as soon as I heard." "Did ye now?" Suspicion darkened Hagrid's expression. "Dumbledore sent me ter get little Harry. He's ter go ter his aunt and uncle." "Petunia?" Severus spat the name. "You can't be serious." She hated Lily. Hated magic. Hagrid's expression turned mulish. "Dumbledore's orders. Blood protection, he says. Only safe place for the boy." Severus looked down at Lily's body, then at her son. The boy was watching him with those painfully familiar green eyes. "Give him to me," Severus said quietly. I was her friend." "Sorry, Snape." Dumbledore was clear. "The boy goes ter the Muggles." Hagrid moved to the crib and gently lifted Harry, who began to cry again, reaching for his mother. "You don't understand," Severus began, but he was interrupted by the sound of more arrivals downstairs. "Ministry's here," Hagrid grunted. "Best ye not be found, considerin'." Severus glanced at his left forearm, where the dark mark lay hidden beneath his sleeve. He took one last look at Lily, committing every detail of her face to memory, then at her son. "I'll keep my promise," he whispered, so softly that Hagrid couldn't hear. Then he disapparated with a crack, leaving behind the ruins of everything he'd ever loved. In Dumbledore's office, hours later, Severus paced like a caged animal. "You said you would protect them," he snarled, magic crackling around him in his rage. "You gave me your word." Dumbledore sat behind his desk, looking every one of his many years. The Fidelius charm was broken from within, Severus. Sirius Black betrayed them. There was nothing I could have done. And now you're sending her son to Petunia? Severus stopped pacing, fixing the headmaster with a burning glare. That woman despises magic. She was cruel to Lily. She'll be cruel to her son. It is necessary, Dumbledore said firmly. Lily's sacrifice created a powerful protection in her blood. As long as Harry lives with her sister, that protection endures. He will be safe from Voldemort and his followers there. Safe from the Dark Lord, perhaps, but what about from them? Severus demanded. I knew Petunia as a child. She's a bitter, jealous woman. And her husband is worse. Dumbledore steepled his fingers. There are greater dangers than an unpleasant childhood, Severus. The Death Eaters believe Harry somehow destroyed their master. They will hunt for him. Then let me protect him, Severus insisted. I made a vow, you will protect him, Dumbledore interrupted. But from a distance. Your position as a spy is too valuable. If Voldemort returns, and I believe he will, we will need someone in his inner circle. Severus stared at the old wizard, seeing the calculation behind the grief in those blue eyes. You're planning something. The boy isn't just a child to you, is he? Dumbledore sighed. Harry Potter is our best hope, Severus. The prophecy, damn your prophecy. Severus slammed his fist on the desk. He's a baby. Lily's baby. And that is precisely why you cannot be directly involved in his life, Dumbledore said gently. Your feelings cloud your judgment. Your history with James Potter, this isn't about James Potter, Severus hissed. It's about my promise to Lily. A promise you can keep by helping me protect the boy from afar, Dumbledore insisted. When he comes to Hogwarts, 7 years from now, Severus cut in bitterly. Yes. And in those years, you will be here, rebuilding your life, securing your position. The wizarding world believes you were my spy all along. Let them continue to believe it. Dumbledore rose from his chair. I've arranged for you to remain as potions master. In time, perhaps, you might consider taking on the role of head of Slytherin House. Severus laughed hollowly. You think I care about teaching potions to dunderheads? About house politics? Lily is dead. And her son lives, Dumbledore said quietly. Remember that, Severus. After he left Dumbledore's office, Severus didn't return to his quarters in the dungeons. Instead, he apparat to a quiet street in Surrey, where he disillusioned himself and watched from the shadows as Dumbledore and McGonagall left a bundle on the doorstep of number 4, Privet Drive. This is a mistake, Albus, McGonagall was saying, her Scottish brogue thickened by emotion. I've watched these people all day. They're the worst sort of muggles. They're his family, Dumbledore replied firmly. Blood of his blood. Severus watched as they departed, leaving Harry Potter, the boy who lived, savior of the wizarding world, sleeping on a doorstep in November. He waited until their footsteps faded before approaching the bundle. The child slept peacefully, unaware of the changes in his life. The lightning scar stood out vividly against his pale skin. Severus reached down and brushed a lock of black hair, James Potter's hair, away from the boy's forehead. I promised your mother I would protect you, he whispered. And I will. Not for Dumbledore. Not for his grand schemes. For her. And, for you. Removing his wand, Severus began casting subtle detection spells and protective enchantments that would alert him if the child was in danger. Spells to regulate temperature, to ward off common illnesses. Nothing that would interfere with Lily's blood protection, but additional layers of security nonetheless. As he worked, he felt the weight of Dumbledore's blood wards, powerful old magic, anchored in sacrifice and love. But there were gaps in that protection, weaknesses that someone who understood the dark arts could exploit. Severus strengthened those weak points, weaving his own magic with Lily's lingering sacrifice. Finally, he cast one last spell, a modified tracking charm linked to his own magical signature. Unlike standard tracking spells that could be detected by other wizards, this one would be invisible to all but Severus himself. "I will be watching," he promised the sleeping child. Always. For years passed. Severus established himself as Hogwarts' feared potions master and head of Slytherin House. Students trembled in his presence. Fellow teachers regarded him with a mixture of respect and wariness. Only Dumbledore seemed to see past his carefully constructed facade of bitter indifference. But 3 or 4 nights each month, Severus would disappear from the castle. On those nights, he could be found disillusioned on Privet Drive, watching over a growing boy with messy black hair and Lily's eyes. What he saw filled him with cold rage. Harry Potter did not know cruelty in the way that Severus himself had known it. There were no beatings, no drunken tirades. But there was neglect. Isolation. The casual malice of a family that viewed him as an unwanted burden. Severus watched as Harry was given his cousin's oversized cast-offs while Dudley Dursley received mountains of new toys and clothes. He saw the child assigned chores far beyond what a 5-year-old could reasonably manage, then punished for failing. He observed Harry eating meager portions while his uncle and cousin stuffed themselves, noted how the boy slept in a cupboard under the stairs while his cousin had 2 bedrooms. "This is your idea of protection, Albus?" Severus muttered to himself one cold December night as he watched Harry being locked in his cupboard without dinner for accidentally breaking a plate. The savior of the wizarding world, treated like a house elf. Severus debated intervening directly. He could cast a Confundus charm on Vernon and Petunia Dursley, make them forget their resentment of their nephew. Or he could simply take the boy, disappear with him to the continent, perhaps, where Dumbledore's influence was weaker. But he knew the dangers of such actions. The blood protection was real, and it was powerful. And Dumbledore would never stop searching if Harry disappeared. So Severus did what he could from the shadows. When 5-year-old Harry developed a high fever and the Dursleys simply shut him in his cupboard with a bottle of children's paracetamol, Severus slipped inside while they slept and administered a mild healing potion, diluted so that it wouldn't trigger questions about the boy's miraculous recovery. When Harry's primary school teacher began noticing the signs of neglect, Severus made sure the woman found resources on identifying abuse and reporting procedures mysteriously appearing on her desk. When Vernon Dursley dragged Harry home by the ear after an incident of accidental magic at school and prepared to lock him in his cupboard for a week, Severus caused every light in the house to explode simultaneously. The resulting electrical problems kept Vernon too busy to follow through on the punishment. Small interventions. Nothing that would alert Dumbledore to his actions, nothing that would disrupt the blood protection. Just enough to ensure Harry survived his childhood with his spirit intact. It wasn't enough. Severus knew it wasn't enough. But it was all he could do without risking everything. Until the day something changed. It was summer, and 6-year-old Harry was weeding the garden while his aunt watched from the shade of the porch, sipping iced tea. The boy was too thin, his knees and elbows knobby beneath oversized clothes. Sweat plastered his dark hair to his forehead, partially hiding the lightning scar. Severus stood across the street, disillusioned, observing as he had so many times before. He'd been busy with end-of-term duties at Hogwarts and hadn't checked on Harry in nearly 3 weeks. The boy seemed even smaller than he remembered. "Boy!" Petunia's shrill voice cut through the quiet afternoon. "You've missed half the weeds by the rose bushes. Do it again, properly this time, or there'll be no dinner." Harry didn't argue, just moved wearily to the rose bushes and began again, his small hands already red and scratched from the thorns. Something in Severus snapped. Before he could reconsider, he cancelled the disillusionment charm and crossed the street. Petunia was facing away from him, berating Harry for his apparently substandard weeding technique. "Toonie," Severus said quietly. "Still as charming as ever, I see." Petunia whirled around, her face draining of color as she recognized him. "You," she gasped. "What are you? How dare you come here?" Harry looked up in confusion, his green eyes widening at the sight of the tall, black-clad stranger who had somehow made his formidable aunt stumble backward in shock. "I came to check on Lily's son," Severus said coldly. "Imagine my surprise to find him treated worse than a servant in your immaculate home." "We took him in," Petunia hissed, glancing nervously at the neighbors' houses. "We clothe him, feed him, barely," Severus cut her off. "I've been watching, Petunia. For years, I've been watching. Did you think Dumbledore would leave him here without some kind of surveillance?" This was a calculated risk, letting Petunia believe he was there on Dumbledore's orders. But it was safer than admitting he'd been acting on his own. Petunia paled further. "Vernon and I are doing our best with the boy. He's difficult. Abnormal. Like you. Like she was." Severus took a step closer, and Petunia flinched. "Careful, Toonie," he said softly. "That's your sister you're speaking of. Your sister who died protecting her child. The child you've locked in a cupboard for the past 5 years. Who are you?" Harry's small voice interrupted the tension. He had stood up from the flower bed, garden trowel still clutched in his dirt-smudged hand. Severus turned to look at the boy, really look at him, for the first time in years. Those eyes. Lily's eyes, staring up at him with a mixture of wariness and curiosity that stabbed at his heart. "Someone who knew your mother," Severus replied, his voice gentler than Petunia had ever heard it. "Someone who made her a promise. Don't you dare talk to him about that." Petunia spat, finding her courage. "We agreed when we took him in, no mention of his freakishness, no mention of that world." Severus arched an eyebrow. "Did you, indeed? And did Dumbledore agree to these terms?" "Somehow I doubt it." He turned back to Harry, who was watching the exchange with increasing interest. "You knew my mother?" the boy asked, hope bleeding into his voice. "What was she like?" Before Severus could answer, Petunia grabbed Harry's skinny arm and yanked him toward the house. "Inside. Now." "Let go of him," Severus said quietly, but with such menace that Petunia's hand dropped from Harry's arm as if burned. He reached inside his coat and withdrew his wand, keeping it partially concealed but visible enough that Petunia understood the threat. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "Not here, in broad daylight. Your kind has rules." "My kind has ways of making exceptions," Severus replied silkily. "And memories can be adjusted. Now, I believe the boy asked me a question." Harry looked between the adults, confusion evident on his small face. "Are you, like me? Aunt Petunia says I'm a freak. Are you a freak too?" Something tightened painfully in Severus's chest. The echo of his own childhood in those words was unmistakable. "You are not a freak, Harry," he said firmly. "You are a wizard. As was your mother. As am I." Harry's eyes widened. "A wizard? Like magic? Real magic?" "There's no such thing as magic." Petunia shrieked, looking frantically around at the neighboring houses. "Get inside this instant, both of you, before someone hears this nonsense." For once, Severus agreed with her. This conversation shouldn't happen in the open. With a curt nod, he followed Petunia and Harry into the house, closing the door firmly behind them. The interior of number 4 was exactly as Severus had observed through windows over the years, obsessively clean, filled with photographs of Dudley Dursley at various ages, with no sign that another child lived there at all. "Vernon will be home soon," Petunia said, wringing her hands. "He won't like this. He won't like this at all." "I'm devastated to hear it," Severus drawled. "Sit down, Petunia. You too, Harry. We have much to discuss." Harry perched on the edge of the sofa, his feet barely touching the floor. He looked both frightened and exhilarated. "I'm really a wizard?" he asked. "Is that why strange things happen around me sometimes?" Severus nodded. That's called accidental magic. All young witches and wizards experience it when their emotions run high. It's perfectly normal. Normal? Petunia gave a hysterical laugh. There's nothing normal about it. It's why my sister got herself blown up, and it's why we've been stuck with him ever since. Harry flinched. Blown up? But you said my parents died in a car crash. Severus went very still. A car crash, he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. You told Lily's son that she died in a car crash. Petunia crossed her arms defensively. What were we supposed to tell him? That she was murdered by an evil wizard? That they were involved in some magical war? He was a baby. And we never wanted him knowing about that world. It only leads to trouble. It's his world, Severus said coldly. His birthright. You had no right to keep it from him. We had every right. He was left on our doorstep with nothing but a letter. No choice, no consultation, just here's your dead sister's son, deal with it. We've clothed him, fed him, barely, Severus interrupted again. And you've lied to him about who he is, about who his parents were. He turned to Harry, whose expression had shifted from excitement to hurt confusion. Your parents did not die in a car crash, Harry. They were murdered by a dark wizard called Lord Voldemort. They died protecting you. Harry's eyes filled with tears. Why would Aunt Petunia lie? Because she has always been jealous of magic, Severus said bluntly. Because your mother had something special that she could never have, and she has never forgiven her for it. That's not true. Petunia protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Severus challenged. You called Lily a freak. You're calling her son a freak. All because you couldn't bear that she was extraordinary and you were, not. Petunia flinched as if slapped. Get out of my house, she whispered. Take your freakishness and get out. Gladly, Severus replied. But not alone. He turned to Harry. Pack your things, Harry. You're coming with me. Harry's eyes widened. Really? Where? Somewhere you'll be properly cared for, Severus said firmly. Somewhere you'll learn about your parents, about magic. About who you really are. You can't take him, Petunia said, panic entering her voice. Dumbledore said he has to stay here. Something about blood protection. He was very clear. Severus hesitated. She was right, of course. The blood protection was the boy's best defense against the Dark Lord's remaining followers. Against the Dark Lord himself, should he return. I'm not removing him permanently, Severus said after a moment. But he will be spending time away from this house. Learning about his heritage. Being treated like a human being rather than an unwanted burden. Dumbledore won't allow it, Petunia insisted. Dumbledore doesn't need to know, Severus replied coldly. Not yet. Not until arrangements have been made. He turned back to Harry, who was watching the exchange with growing hope. Go and pack your things, Harry. Clothes, anything important to you. We'll be gone before your uncle returns. Harry hesitated only a moment before scrambling off the sofa and hurrying to the cupboard under the stairs. Severus followed him, something twisting in his chest as he watched the boy open the small door and duck inside. The cupboard was tiny, with a threadbare mattress on the floor and a few broken toys on a crude shelf. A single bulb hung from the ceiling. Harry pulled a pillowcase from his pillow and began stuffing his meager possessions into it. Is this really where you sleep? Severus asked quietly. Harry nodded, not looking up. It's not so bad. I'm used to it. Those simple words, spoken with a child's acceptance of circumstances beyond his control, solidified Severus's decision. Dumbledore's plans be damned. The boy would not spend another night in this house if he could help it. You won't be sleeping here again, Severus promised. Never again. When Harry had finished packing, a process that took less than 5 minutes, so few were his possessions. They returned to the living room. Petunia stood exactly where they'd left her, her thin face pinched with anxiety. "If you take him, the protection fails," she said desperately. "That's what the letter said. He has to call this place home." "And does he?" Severus asked quietly. "Can you honestly say you've given him a home, Petunia? Or merely a roof and bare subsistence?" Petunia had no answer for that. "He will return," Severus conceded reluctantly. "For brief periods, to maintain the blood protection. But his education begins now. And if I find that he's been mistreated during these visits?" He left the threat hanging. Taking Harry's small hand in his, Severus led the boy to the door. He paused on the threshold, looking back at Lily's sister. "She would have taken care of your son, had the situations been reversed," he said quietly. "She would have loved him like her own. Remember that." Then he stepped outside, Harry at his side, and closed the door on Petunia Evans Desley's white, shocked face. "Where are we going, sir?" Harry asked, trotting to keep up with Severus's long strides. "Somewhere safe," Severus replied. "And my name is Professor Severus Snape. I teach potions at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, where you'll be going when you're 11. A school for magic?" Harry's face lit up. "There's a whole school." Despite himself, Severus felt the corner of his mouth twitch upward. "There's a whole world, Harry. Your world. And it's time you learned about it." "Absolutely not." Dumbledore's voice was uncharacteristically sharp. "The boy must remain with his aunt and uncle. The blood protection is meaningless if they break his spirit first," Severus interrupted. They stood in Dumbledore's office, where Severus had come directly after settling Harry in a secure location. "You didn't see him, Albus. Sleeping in a cupboard. Wearing clothes 3 sizes too large. Forced to weed the garden for hours in the summer heat while his cousin sits inside playing video games. A difficult childhood, perhaps, but a safe one," Dumbledore insisted. "Safe?" Severus laughed bitterly. "From the Dark Lord, perhaps. But not from the damage that comes from being told every day that you're worthless, a burden, a freak. Not from the harm of believing your parents died in a car crash because they were drunk." Dumbledore's eyes widened. "They told him what?" "They've been feeding him lies," Severus said coldly. "Keeping him ignorant of his heritage, of his parents' sacrifice. Is that what Lily died for? So her son could grow up unloved and ignorant in Petunia's cupboard?" Dumbledore sighed heavily, suddenly looking every one of his many years. "Where is the boy now, Severus?" "Safe," Severus replied stubbornly. "And learning the truth about who he is." "You must return him," Dumbledore insisted. "For his own protection, I will not," Severus said flatly. "I made a vow to protect Lily's son. Not just from the Dark Lord, but from all harm. And those muggles are harming him." Dumbledore studied him for a long moment. "You've grown attached to the boy," he observed. Severus scowled. "I've grown tired of watching him being mistreated while you assure me it's for the greater good. There must be another way to maintain the blood protection without condemning him to a childhood of neglect." "Perhaps," Dumbledore conceded after a long pause. "The protection requires that he call his aunt's house home until he reaches his majority. But it doesn't specify how much time he must spend there." Severus leaned forward, sensing a potential compromise. "What are you suggesting?" "If Harry returns to Privet Drive for, say, 2 weeks each summer, it should be sufficient to renew the protection," Dumbledore said thoughtfully. "The rest of the time, arrangements could be made." "He stays with me," Severus said immediately. "I've already secured suitable accommodations." Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. "You, Severus? The man who has spent 6 years nurturing a grudge against James Potter. You would raise his son?" "I would protect Lily's son," Severus corrected. And I've spent the last 5 years watching over him already, as you well know. I was aware of your occasional visits to Privet Drive, Dumbledore admitted. Though I didn't realize they were quite so frequent. 3 or 4 nights every month, Severus said quietly. For 5 years. I've seen everything those muggles have done to him. Dumbledore sighed again. I never intended for the boy to suffer, Severus. I truly believed that family ties would overcome Petunia's difficulties with magic. Then you were a fool, Severus said bluntly. I knew Petunia as a child. Her jealousy of Lily twisted into something ugly long before Hogwarts. Dumbledore was silent for a long moment, considering. Very well, he said finally. Harry may remain with you, for now. But there will be conditions. Name them, Severus said, trying to keep the triumph from his voice. First, the arrangement must remain secret. As far as the wizarding world is concerned, Harry Potter continues to live with his Muggle relatives. The fewer people who know his true whereabouts, the safer he will be. Severus nodded. That was sensible. Second, he must return to Privet Drive for 2 weeks each summer to renew the blood protection. Agreed, though I will be checking on him regularly during those 2 weeks, Severus said firmly. Third, Dumbledore continued, you will prepare him for Hogwarts and for the challenges that lie ahead, but you will not coddle him, Severus. The boy has a difficult path before him. Severus frowned. I have no intention of coddling anyone. But neither will I allow him to be used as a pawn in whatever game you're playing, Albus. Dumbledore's blue eyes hardened slightly. This is not a game, Severus. Voldemort will return. When he does, Harry must be ready. He's a child, Severus said through gritted teeth. Lily's child. Not a weapon for you to aim at the Dark Lord. He is both, Dumbledore said quietly. And he will need you to see him as Harry, not just as Lily's son. Can you do that, Severus? Can you see beyond James Potter's face to the boy himself? Severus thought of those green eyes looking up at him trustingly as they left Privet Drive. The boy's cautious hope, his quiet resilience after years of neglect. I already do, he said softly. I see Lily in him. Not just her eyes, but her spirit. Her kindness, despite everything those muggles did to crush it. Dumbledore nodded slowly. Then perhaps this arrangement will benefit you both. There is one more condition, however. What? When Harry comes to Hogwarts, your relationship must appear more formal. It would not do for students or staff to believe you show favoritism to Harry Potter, of all people. Severus snorted. I assure you, favoritism is not in my nature, regardless of my connection to the boy. Good, Dumbledore said, a hint of his usual twinkle returning to his eyes. Then we are agreed. Harry Potter will remain in your guardianship, with periodic returns to Privet Drive to maintain the blood protection. But remember, Severus, this arrangement remains between us. Not even the other teachers can know. Severus nodded curtly. Agreed. Now, if there's nothing else. Just one thing, Dumbledore said as Severus turned to leave. Where exactly have you hidden Harry Potter? Severus allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Somewhere neither the Ministry, the remaining Death Eaters, nor you would think to look for him. He paused at the door. Don't worry, Albus. He's safe. And he's learning the truth about his parents at last. With that, he swept from the office, his black robes billowing behind him. For the first time in nearly 6 years, Severus Snape felt something like hope. So my parents were heroes? Harry asked, his voice small in the quiet of Severus's modest cottage. They sat in the living room, a room dominated by bookshelves overflowing with texts on potions, defense against the dark arts, and advanced magical theory. A fire crackled in the grate, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The cottage, hidden under layers of protective enchantments on the outskirts of a small wizarding village in Yorkshire, was Severus's personal retreat. Few knew of its existence, fewer still had ever been invited inside. Now it would be Harry's home for much of the year. Yes, Severus said quietly. They fought against a very powerful dark wizard. Many witches and wizards were too frightened to oppose him, but your parents joined a group that stood against him and his followers. And this dark wizard? Voldemort. He killed them. Harry's fingers twisted in the hem of his oversized shirt, one of Dudley's cast-offs that Severus had mentally added to the list of things that needed immediate replacement. He did, Severus confirmed, choosing his words carefully. He came to your home on Halloween night in 1981. Your father died trying to hold him off, to give you and your mother time to escape. Your mother, she died protecting you. Me? Why did he want to hurt me? I was just a baby. Severus hesitated. The prophecy was not something a 6-year-old needed to know about, not yet. There was a reason, he said finally, but that's a conversation for when you're older. What matters is that your mother's love for you was so powerful that it created a magical protection. When Voldemort tried to kill you after killing her, the curse rebounded on him instead. That's how you got your scar. Harry's small hand went to his forehead, tracing the lightning bolt shape. So he's dead. Voldemort? Weakened, Severus corrected. Not dead. There are magics that prevent him from truly dying. That, too, is a discussion for when you're older. Harry's brow furrowed, but he seemed to accept this. Did you know my parents well, Professor Snape? The question Severus had been dreading. He took a slow breath. I knew your mother very well. We grew up in the same town. We were friends, for many years. Your father. I knew him at school, but we were not friends. That was as diplomatic as Severus could manage when speaking of James Potter. Were you friends with my mum when she died? Harry asked innocently. Severus felt a sharp pain in his chest. No, he said quietly. We had a falling out, years before. A mistake I've regretted every day since. Harry nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense to him. Is that why you're helping me now? Because of my mum? Yes, Severus admitted. I made a promise to protect you. I should have done a better job of it before now. Harry considered this. But the Dursleys said my parents didn't want me. That's why they got drunk and crashed the car. Cold fury washed through Severus. That was a lie, he said, keeping his voice even with effort. Your parents loved you more than anything in this world. Your mother died rather than step aside and let Voldemort harm you. Never doubt that you were wanted, Harry. Never doubt that you were loved. To his horror, tears welled up in the child's eyes. No one's ever said that before, Harry whispered. That I was loved. Something cracked in Severus's carefully constructed walls. Before he could think better of it, he moved to sit beside Harry on the sofa and awkwardly put an arm around the boy's thin shoulders. Well, it's true, he said gruffly. And it's high time someone told you. Harry hesitated for just a moment before leaning into the half-embrace, probably the first he could remember receiving. The gesture of trust twisted something painful in Severus's chest. Am I really going to live here now? Harry asked after a moment, wiping his eyes on his sleeve. Most of the time, Severus confirmed. You'll need to return to your aunt and uncle's house for 2 weeks each summer, but why? Harry interrupted, looking alarmed. They don't want me. And I don't want to go back to my cupboard. You will never sleep in that cupboard again, Severus said firmly. I'll make that very clear to your aunt and uncle. But the magical protection your mother created, the one that saved you from Voldemort, is tied to your aunt's blood. Spending a short time under her roof each year keeps the protection active until you come of age at 17. Harry didn't look happy about this, but he nodded. And the rest of the time I'll be here? With you? Yes, Severus said, surprised by how easily the answer came. You'll be here. With me. Will you teach me about magic? Harry asked, perking up a bit. I will, Severus said. Though there are restrictions on underage magic, so you won't be able to perform spells until you're at Hogwarts. But there's plenty you can learn in the meantime: magical theory, potion ingredients, the history of magic. And you'll need a proper Muggle education as well. Harry frowned. Muggle? Non-magical people, Severus explained. Like your aunt and uncle. The term isn't derogatory, it's simply what we call those without magic. But why do I need Muggle education if I'm going to be a wizard? Severus's lips twitched. Because, Mr. Potter, mathematics doesn't change whether you're casting spells or not. Neither does grammar, or science, or history. A well-rounded education is essential for any witch or wizard who wishes to excel. Harry considered this. I like reading, he offered. When I can get books. Dudley doesn't read much, so sometimes Aunt Petunia would let me have his books if he wasn't using them. You'll have plenty of books here, Severus assured him, gesturing to the overflowing shelves. Though I'll need to acquire some more age-appropriate ones for you. He made a mental list of the immediate necessities: children's books, both magical and Muggle, new clothes, toys appropriate for a 6-year-old, a proper bed and bedroom furnishings for the cottage's spare room. Merlin, was he really doing this? Taking in James Potter's son? But as he looked down at the small boy beside him, Lily's son, with her eyes and her gentle spirit, Severus knew he had made the right decision. For the first time since that terrible night in Godric's Hollow, he was truly keeping his promise. It's late, he said, noting Harry's drooping eyelids. You've had an overwhelming day. Let's get you to bed, and tomorrow we'll start making proper arrangements. He showed Harry to the cottage's small second bedroom. It was sparsely furnished, just a bed, a wardrobe, and a small desk, but it was clean and comfortable, with a window overlooking the cottage garden. This is all for me? Harry asked, eyes wide as he took in the room. It's huge. Severus frowned. It's a perfectly ordinary-sized bedroom, Harry. And yes, it's all yours. Tomorrow we'll make it more suitable for a child your age. Harry carefully placed his pillowcase of belongings on the bed. Thank you, Professor Snape, he said seriously. For taking me away from there. For telling me about my parents. Something twisted in Severus's chest again. You're welcome, Harry. Now, there are clean towels in the bathroom across the hall. I'll find you something to sleep in. He transfigured one of his own shirts into a child-sized pair of pajamas, dark green, with silver piping. A touch of Slytherin house colors, he realized with amusement. Old habits. When Harry was washed and changed and tucked into bed, he looked up at Severus with those two serious green eyes. Will you tell me more about my mum tomorrow? I will, Severus promised. I have photographs, too. And stories. Harry smiled, a real smile that transformed his small face. Good night, Professor Snape. Good night, Harry, Severus replied softly. He hesitated in the doorway, an unfamiliar protective instinct washing over him. If you need anything in the night, my room is just down the hall. He closed the door part way, leaving it cracked open so that light from the hallway spilled into the room. Then he made his way back to the living room, where he poured himself a generous measure of fire whiskey and sank into his favorite armchair. What are you doing, Severus? He murmured to himself. Taking in Potter's son. Playing house with the boy who lived. But he knew it was more than that. This wasn't about James Potter, or even about Lily, not really. It was about a small boy with old eyes who had never been told he was loved. A child who slept in a cupboard and wore his cousin's cast-offs and believed his parents had died in a drunk driving accident. It was about keeping a promise, yes. But it was also about doing what was right. What was necessary. Severus Snape, former Death Eater, spy, potions master, was now responsible for raising Harry Potter. The irony wasn't lost on him. But as he sipped his fire whiskey and stared into the flames, he found himself planning for a future he had never imagined. Harry would need proper clothes, books, toys, a primary school education, perhaps a tutor, given the need for secrecy, and magical education, of course, to prepare him for Hogwarts. Most importantly, Harry needed the truth about his past, his parents, and the wizarding world that would one day see him as their savior. "Well, Lily," Severus murmured to the empty room, "I'm keeping my promise. Though not quite in the way either of us expected, I imagine." He could almost hear her laughing. The following months brought changes that Severus could never have anticipated. His solitary, carefully ordered life transformed into something chaotic, unpredictable, and oddly fulfilling. Harry proved to be an intelligent, curious child once freed from the oppressive environment of Privet Drive. He devoured books on magical history and theory, asked endless questions about Hogwarts and the wizarding world, and demonstrated a natural aptitude for potion-making that made Severus secretly proud. "Stir clockwise, Harry," Severus instructed as they worked on a simple cure for Boyle's potion. 3 times only, then let it simmer. Harry, standing on a stool to reach the cauldron, his face scrunched in concentration, carefully followed the directions. At 7 years old, he was still small for his age, but regular meals and proper care had begun to fill out his formerly skinny frame. "Like this, Professor?" he asked, completing the 3rd stir. "Precisely," Severus confirmed. "Now we wait 7 minutes while the porcupine quills incorporate." Harry carefully set down the stirring rod and pushed his glasses up his nose. "Why do we use porcupine quills in healing potions?" "An excellent question," Severus said, allowing a hint of approval to show. "Porcupine quills have natural anti-inflammatory properties. When combined with the horned slugs, they create a compound that accelerates skin regeneration." Harry nodded seriously, absorbing the information. "Is that why they're used in the Wiggenweld potion too?" Severus raised an eyebrow. "You've been reading ahead, I see." Harry ducked his head, suddenly looking nervous. "Is that bad?" "No," Severus said quickly, recognizing the lingering insecurity from Harry's time with the Dursleys. "It's commendable. A good potioneer is always prepared." The smile that bloomed on Harry's face made something warm unfurl in Severus's chest. It was happening more often lately, this strange, protective fondness for Lily's son. For Harry. It hadn't been easy at first. Despite his resolve to see the boy as his own person, Severus had struggled with the ghost of James Potter that seemed to hover around his son. The messy black hair, the facial structure, the occasional gesture that was pure Potter, all triggered old resentments that Severus had to consciously set aside. But as the days became weeks, and the weeks became months, it became easier to see past those surface similarities to the person Harry truly was. And that person was, in many ways, more like Lily than James. He had her kindness, her quick mind, her emotional intelligence. And her talent for potions, it seemed. Their routine had settled into something surprisingly comfortable. Mornings were devoted to Harry's Muggle education, with a tutor named Ms. Blackwood, a squib with connections to the wizarding world who could be trusted with Harry's identity and who came to the cottage 3 times a week. Afternoons were for magical education, history, theory, and preliminary potions work under Severus's supervision. Evenings were for stories, usually about Lily, sometimes about the wizarding world in general. Harry soaked up these stories like a sponge, particularly anything about his mother. "She was the best in our year at charms," Severus told him one night as they sat by the fire. "Professor Flitwick, who still teaches at Hogwarts, used to say she had a natural feel for the way magic wanted to flow." "What was her favorite spell?" Harry asked, curled up in what had become his corner of the sofa, a cup of hot chocolate cradled in his hands. Severus considered this. "She had a particular affinity for the Patronus charm, a very advanced protective spell. Hers took the form of a doe. And she was rather fond of a charm that turned flower petals into butterflies. She'd cast it in the park where we played as children." Can you do a Patronus? Harry asked curiously. Severus hesitated. I can, he said finally. Though it's not a spell I cast often. Could I see it? Harry asked eagerly. Please. Those green eyes, Lily's eyes, looked up at him with such hope that Severus couldn't refuse. Drawing his wand, he closed his eyes briefly, searching for a happy memory. Once, his happiest memories had all been of Lily in their childhood. Now, strangely, he found himself thinking of Harry's face the first time he'd successfully completed a potion on his own. Expecto Patronum, he said quietly. Silver mist flowed from his wand, coalescing into the form of a graceful doe. She stepped lightly around the room, her ethereal light casting silver reflections in Harry's wide eyes. She's beautiful, Harry whispered. And you said my mum's was a doe too? Yes, Severus confirmed, his throat tight. The same. Is that normal? For two people to have the same Patronus? No, Severus said softly. It's quite rare. Harry seemed to understand there was more to the story, but with the intuition that often surprised Severus, he didn't press. Instead, he watched the silver doe until she faded, his expression thoughtful. I want to learn how to do that someday, he said finally. You will, Severus promised. When you're older. Such moments, quiet, domestic, almost peaceful, had become the unexpected cornerstone of their life together. But there were challenges too. Dumbledore visited occasionally, ostensibly to check on Harry's progress but, Severus suspected, also to ensure that he wasn't turning the boy who lived into a junior Death Eater. The old man never said as much, but Severus could read the concern behind those twinkling blue eyes. You seem to have settled into domesticity quite well, Severus, Dumbledore observed during one such visit, watching as Harry carefully tended the magical herbs in the cottage garden. Hardly domesticity, Severus replied dryly. I'm preparing the boy for what's to come, as we agreed. Dumbledore's gaze was shrewd. And yet, there's more to it than that, isn't there? You've come to care for the boy. Severus stiffened. I've come to see him as more than just James Potter's son, if that's what you mean. He has Lily's intellect. Her aptitude for potions. And her capacity for love, Dumbledore added softly, watching as Harry carefully transplanted a young Flutterby bush, his small face serious with concentration. A capacity I suspect he's awakening in you as well, old friend. Severus scowled. Don't be absurd, Albus. But he couldn't deny, at least to himself, that something had changed. The bitterness that had defined him for so long had begun to recede, like a tide going out, leaving something new and unfamiliar in its place. There were difficult moments, of course. The first time Harry asked about his father, Severus had struggled to answer honestly without allowing his old resentments to color his response. Your father was talented, he'd said carefully. Particularly at Transfiguration and on the Quidditch pitch. He was a chaser for Gryffindor House. But you didn't like him, Harry had said perceptively. Severus had sighed. No, I didn't. We were rivals at school. He was popular, athletic. I was neither of those things. Did my mum like him? Not initially, Severus had admitted. But later, yes. Very much. It was as fair as he could be about James Potter. And it seemed to satisfy Harry, who was building a picture of his parents piece by piece from Severus's carefully edited stories. The most challenging moment, however, came with Harry's first return to Privet Drive to renew the blood protection. Do I really have to go back? Harry asked, his voice small as Severus helped him pack a bag for the 2-week stay. What if they put me in the cupboard again? They won't, Severus said firmly. I've made that very clear to your aunt. You'll have Dudley's second bedroom for your stay. And I'll be checking on you every day. Harry bit his lip. Promise? I promise, Harry, Severus said solemnly. It's only for 2 weeks. Then you'll be back here for the rest of the summer. The visit had gone as well as could be expected. True to his word, Severus checked on Harry daily, sometimes visibly to remind the Dursleys of his presence, sometimes disillusioned to ensure they weren't treating Harry poorly when they thought no one was watching. The Dursleys, cowed by Severus's threats and by the revelation that their treatment of Harry had been observed for years, maintained a cool but not overtly hostile environment. Vernon clearly wanted to vent his spleen but was too frightened of Severus to do more than mutter under his breath. Petunia maintained a pinched expression but ensured Harry was fed properly and had access to the second bedroom. Dudley, confused by the change in status quo, alternated between trying to bully Harry when adults weren't looking and being bewildered when Harry seemed unaffected by his taunts. For his part, Harry endured the 2 weeks with remarkable resilience, buoyed by the knowledge that it was temporary and that Severus was watching over him. When Severus came to collect him at the end of the 2 weeks, Harry flew down the stairs and practically tackled him in a hug, the first time the boy had initiated such physical contact. Severus, startled, had awkwardly patted his back while fixing Vernon and Petunia with a cold stare over Harry's head. "Ready to go home?" he'd asked quietly. Harry had nodded vigorously against his chest. "More than ready. Home." The cottage had become that for both of them, somehow. A sanctuary where Harry could learn and grow, and where Severus, to his own surprise, found something like contentment in the role of guardian. As Harry's 8th birthday approached, Severus found himself planning something he'd never imagined doing, a small celebration. Nothing elaborate, nothing that would draw attention, but something to mark the day in a way Harry had never experienced before. He arranged for a special dinner of all Harry's favorite foods, prepared a dark chocolate cake, discovering, in the process, that he had a previously untapped talent for baking, and even purchased gifts, new books on magical creatures and potions, a child's potions kit with safe ingredients, and a small, enchanted model of a Hungarian horntail dragon that could fly around the room breathing harmless sparks. The look on Harry's face when he saw the cake and presents, pure astonishment giving way to joy, was something Severus knew he would remember for the rest of his life. "Is this all for me?" Harry had asked, his voice hushed. "It's your birthday, is it not?" Severus had replied, trying for his usual sardonic tone but hearing the warmth that crept in despite himself. "The Dursleys never." Harry had started, then stopped. "Thank you, Professor Snape. This is the best birthday ever." Later that night, after Harry had gone to bed with his new dragon model perched on the bedside table, Severus sat in his study, contemplating how completely his life had changed in just over a year. He'd promised to protect Lily's son. He'd envisioned that protection as something distant, strategic, keeping the boy safe from external threats, ensuring he was prepared for his eventual confrontation with the Dark Lord. He'd never imagined it would mean birthday cakes and bedtime stories and potion lessons at the kitchen table. He'd never imagined he would come to care for the boy himself, not just as Lily's son or as a responsibility, but as Harry. Just Harry. "What would you think of all this, Lily?" he murmured to the empty room. "Your old friend Severus, raising your son. Teaching him about magic. Telling him stories of you." He could almost see her smile, those green eyes, Harry's eyes, shining with approval. It wasn't the life he'd expected. But as he sipped his fire whiskey and listened to the quiet sounds of the sleeping cottage, Severus Snape realized it was the life he would fight to protect, with everything he had. For Harry. For Lily. For the promise he had finally, truly begun to keep. Chapter 2, New Beginnings. The years between Harry's 8th birthday and his 11th passed in what felt like the blink of an eye to Severus. Each day brought new challenges, small triumphs, and the gradual transformation of a neglected boy into a confident young wizard-to-be. Harry's 9th birthday found them experimenting with a modified calming draught. The boy hunched over a simmering cauldron, his tongue caught between his teeth in concentration as he carefully counted stirs. 3 clockwise, 1 counterclockwise, Severus reminded him, watching critically. "I remember," Harry said, not looking up. "That creates the binding pattern for the lavender essence." Severus suppressed a smile. The boy had absorbed potion theory like a sponge these past years. And why are we using lavender instead of the traditional valerian root? Because we're making it for children, Harry replied promptly. Valerian's too strong for anyone under 14. Lavender's gentler but still effective if you balance it with twice the standard amount of chamomile. Correct. Severus couldn't quite keep the pride from his voice. The potion turned a perfect periwinkle blue as Harry completed the final stir. I did it, he exclaimed, grinning up at Severus. Indeed. Your technique has improved considerably. Severus handed him a crystal vial. Now bottle it properly. We'll donate this batch to St. Mungo's pediatric ward. As Harry carefully filled vials, Severus took a moment to observe him. Gone was the flinching, too thin child from Privet Drive. In his place stood a healthy, inquisitive boy with quick hands and quicker mind. He still wore glasses. Severus had taken him to a wizarding optometrist who'd crafted proper ones, but they no longer dominated his face, merely framed those distinctive green eyes. Their routine had evolved over the years. Mourning still belonged to Muggle education, though Ms. Blackwood now focused on advanced mathematics, literature, and sciences. Harry had proved particularly adept at chemistry, potions without magic, as Severus had explained it, and devoured books at an astonishing rate. Afternoons remained dedicated to magical theory, history, astronomy, and herbology, all subjects that could be studied before receiving a wand. And, of course, potions. Professor? Harry interrupted Severus's thoughts. I've been thinking about something. A dangerous pastime, Severus remarked dryly. Harry rolled his eyes, long accustomed to Severus's sardonic humor. It's about wandless magic. You said accidental magic happens when our emotions are strong, right? So couldn't we learn to control it without wands if we practiced enough? Severus raised an eyebrow. An insightful question. Wandless magic is indeed possible, though rare in Western magical traditions. Eastern and African magical communities place greater emphasis on it. So I could learn it? Perhaps, with sufficient discipline. Severus considered the eager boy before him. It would require exceptional focus and understanding of your magical core. Most wizards never master more than simple summoning charms without a wand. But you can do it, Harry persisted. I've seen you light the fire with just a gesture. After 20 years of magical practice, Severus reminded him. But yes, simple spells are within my capability. Harry's eyes gleamed with determination. Will you teach me? Severus hesitated. The boy wasn't even at Hogwarts yet, and already he wanted to attempt advanced magic. But then, wasn't that precisely what made him Lily's son? That thirst for knowledge, that willingness to push boundaries. We can begin with theory and meditation, Severus conceded. Understanding your magical core is the first step toward any form of wandless control. Harry's face lit up. When can we start? After you've properly cleaned your cauldron, Severus said firmly. Magical discipline begins with mundane discipline. Harry groaned but moved to the sink without further complaint. That night, after dinner, they sat cross-legged on cushions in front of the fireplace. Severus had dimmed the lights, leaving the room illuminated mainly by dancing flames. Close your eyes, he instructed. Breathe slowly and deeply. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Harry complied, his small face serious with concentration. Magic flows through every part of you, Severus continued, his voice low and rhythmic. It isn't separate from you, nor is it simply a tool. It's as much a part of you as your blood, your breath, your thoughts. Harry's breathing steadied, his shoulders relaxing. Imagine a warm light in your center. Not in your mind, not in your heart, but deeper. A core of energy that connects to everything you are. For nearly an hour, Severus guided Harry through the meditation, teaching him to sense the magical energy that resided within him. It was the same technique he'd learned as a boy, not from Hogwarts, which treated magic as something to be channeled through wands and incantations, but from his mother's old books on pure magical theory. When they finished, Harry opened his eyes slowly, looking dazed. "I felt something," he whispered. "Like warmth spreading through my fingers." "Is that normal?" "It's a good sign," Severus confirmed. "Your magical awareness is strong. We'll continue these exercises daily. In time, you'll learn to direct that energy consciously." Harry nodded eagerly. It felt right. Like remembering something I'd forgotten. Severus understood exactly what the boy meant. Magic, in its purest form, wasn't about spells or wands but about connection, to one's own essence and to the deeper currents that flowed through the world. Few wizards ever bothered to explore that connection, content with the safer, more controllable magic taught at schools like Hogwarts. But Harry deserved more than the standard education. If he was to face the Dark Lord someday, as Dumbledore seemed convinced he must, then he needed every advantage. "We'll continue tomorrow," Severus promised. "Now, it's time for bed." Harry stood and stretched. "Can we read more about the Founders tonight?" Their evening reading sessions had become a cherished ritual for both of them. They'd progressed from simple children's stories to histories of Hogwarts, magical theory, and even Muggle literature that Severus deemed worthwhile. "Very well. One chapter." As Harry scampered off to prepare for bed, Severus found himself reflecting on how profoundly his life had changed. The cottage, once a Spartan retreat, now bore unmistakable signs of a child's presence: books and small magical experiments scattered across surfaces, a collection of enchanted toy animals on the mantelpiece, Harry's artwork displayed on the refrigerator. And Severus himself had changed perhaps most of all. The bitterness that had defined him for so long hadn't disappeared entirely, he doubted it ever would, but it had receded, making space for something warmer, something he hadn't felt in decades. Hope. Harry's 10th year brought new developments and challenges. His wandless magical exercises progressed steadily, though he remained frustrated by his inability to perform anything beyond making small objects wobble on tables. "Patience," Severus counseled after a particularly disappointing session. "You're attempting magic that most adult wizards never master." "But I need to be stronger," Harry insisted, his jaw set stubbornly. "If Voldemort comes back, then you will face him with proper training and preparation," Severus interrupted firmly. "Not with party tricks." Harry scowled. "It's not a party trick. You said yourself that wandless magic is powerful. When mastered after years of practice," Severus emphasized. "You're 10 years old, Harry. Your magical core is still developing." The boy's shoulders slumped. "I just want to be ready." Severus softened slightly. "You will be. But true preparation takes time and patience, not reckless rushing ahead." This conversation highlighted a growing concern for Severus. He'd been careful about how much he revealed regarding the Dark Lord and the prophecy, wanting to prepare Harry without burdening him with too much knowledge too soon. But the boy was perceptive. He'd pieced together enough to understand that his parents' murderer might someday return and that he, Harry, would be a target. That evening, Severus sent a message to Dumbledore requesting a meeting. 2 days later, he found himself in the headmaster's office at Hogwarts while Harry remained at the cottage under Ms. Blackwood's supervision. "He's asking questions about the Dark Lord," Severus reported, pacing before Dumbledore's desk. "Pushing himself in his studies, particularly defensive magic theory." Dumbledore stroked his beard thoughtfully. "It's natural that he would be curious about his parents' murderer." "It's more than curiosity," Severus countered. "He senses there's something I'm not telling him. He knows he's being prepared for something." "And is he?" Dumbledore's blue eyes were sharp behind his half-moon spectacles. "Being prepared?" Severus stopped pacing. "To the best of my ability." His understanding of magical theory already exceeds that of most first-years. His potion skills are exceptional. And he's been practicing magical awareness exercises. "Wandless magic?" Dumbledore raised an eyebrow. Ambitious. He has the potential, Severus said defensively. His magical control is extraordinary for his age. I don't doubt it, Dumbledore assured him. I merely find it interesting that you've chosen such an unconventional path for his pre-Hogwarts education. Severus narrowed his eyes. Conventional education failed to prepare the last generation against the Dark Lord. I won't make the same mistake with Harry. Dumbledore studied him for a long moment. You've become quite protective of the boy. I made a vow, Severus said stiffly. Yes, to Lily, Dumbledore agreed softly. But I wonder if your current motivation stems entirely from that promise. Severus didn't answer immediately. The truth was more complex than he cared to admit, even to himself. What began as an obligation has, evolved, he finally acknowledged. The boy has certain qualities that merit recognition. Dumbledore smiled knowingly. Indeed. And what of the prophecy? Do you intend to tell him? Not yet, Severus replied firmly. He's still too young to bear that burden. But old enough to practice wandless magic in preparation for a confrontation you won't explain. Dumbledore pointed out mildly. Severus scowled. I'm preparing him without frightening him. There's a difference. Perhaps, Dumbledore conceded. But children often sense more than we credit them with. Harry may need answers sooner than you think. Severus sighed, suddenly feeling the weight of his responsibility anew. I'll tell him what he needs to know when the time is right. Not before. I trust your judgment, Severus, Dumbledore said. You've done remarkably well with him thus far, better than I anticipated, I must admit. Severus bristled slightly at the implied surprise. Did you expect me to bully the boy? To punish him for his father's sins? I expected you to struggle more with James Potter's ghost, Dumbledore said simply. Yet you seem to have made your peace with that particular spectre. Had he? Severus wondered. There were moments, when Harry's grin turned mischievous, when he ran his hand through his perpetually messy hair, that the resemblance to James struck like a physical blow. But those moments had grown fewer with time, overshadowed by all the ways Harry was uniquely himself. The boy is not his father, Severus said finally. Nor is he merely Lily's son. He's Harry. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. Precisely. On his way back to the cottage, Severus considered Dumbledore's words. Perhaps the old wizard was right, perhaps it was time to give Harry more of the truth. Not the full prophecy, perhaps, but enough to satisfy his growing curiosity and give context to his studies. He found Harry in the garden, carefully harvesting aconite under Ms. Blackwood's watchful eye. Remember, don't touch the sap directly, the tutor cautioned. Even with gloves, it's best to be careful. I know, Harry said, gently snipping the flowering stems and placing them in a glass container. Professor Snape says aconite is one of the most useful and dangerous ingredients in the standard potioneer's arsenal. Quite right, Severus said, approaching from the garden gate. Harry looked up with a grin. You're back. Did you bring me anything from Hogwarts? This had become a tradition of sorts. Whenever Severus visited the school, he returned with some small token, a moving photograph of the castle, an unusual potion ingredient from Professor Sprout's greenhouses, a magical sweet from Honeydukes in Hogsmeade. Impertinent child, Severus chided, but reached into his pocket nonetheless, extracting a small paper bag. Professor Flitwick sends his regards. Harry opened the bag to find enchanted sugar quills that wrote in different flavored inks before you could eat them. Brilliant. Thanks, Professor Snape. Ms. Blackwood smiled, gathering her teaching materials. Harry's completed all his assignments for today, Professor. His essay on chemical reactions was particularly good. After she departed, Severus and Harry worked together to finish harvesting the aconite, carefully storing it for future potion making. As they washed up afterward, Severus made his decision. I believe we should talk, Harry, he said as they settled in the sitting room with cups of tea, regular for Severus, lightly sweetened for Harry. Harry immediately looked wary. "Am I in trouble?" "No," Severus assured him. "But I think it's time I explained certain things more fully. Things about your parents, about the Dark Lord, and about why your education has taken the particular form it has." Harry set down his teacup, giving Severus his full attention. "You mean why you're teaching me wandless magic and advanced potions when most kids my age are just learning about Quidditch?" Severus's lips twitched. "Precisely." For the next hour, Severus carefully explained the broader context of the Wizarding War, how the Dark Lord had risen to power, how the Order of the Phoenix had fought against him, and how Harry's parents had been specifically targeted. "There was a prophecy," he said finally, choosing his words with care. "I don't know its exact wording, but it concerned a child who would have the power to defeat the Dark Lord. He believed that child was you." Harry's eyes widened behind his glasses. "Me? But I was just a baby." "Indeed. Which is why his actions made little sense to many of us. But the Dark Lord was obsessive about eliminating any threat to his power. So he tried to kill me because of a prophecy?" Harry looked both bewildered and angry. "That's why my parents died?" Severus nodded grimly. "Your mother died protecting you. Her sacrifice created a powerful magical protection, the same protection that requires you to return to your aunt's house briefly each summer." Harry was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "And you think he'll come back? Voldemort?" Severus flinched slightly at the name but nodded. "The headmaster believes so. And I share his concern. The Dark Lord employed magic of the most forbidden kind. Magic designed to prevent his permanent death. That's why you've been teaching me all this stuff," Harry realized. "So I can fight him if he comes back." "So you can protect yourself," Severus corrected. "You're a child, Harry. It's not your responsibility to defeat dark wizards." Harry's expression turned stubborn. "But the prophecies are notoriously unreliable and open to interpretation," Severus interrupted firmly. "Whatever it may or may not predict, my concern is ensuring you have the knowledge and skills to stay alive. Nothing more." Harry nodded slowly, though Severus could see the wheels turning in his mind. "Is that why you came to get me from the Dursleys? Because of the prophecy?" "No," Severus said honestly. "I came because I made a promise to your mother to protect you. And because no child deserves to sleep in a cupboard and be treated as a burden." Harry's expression softened. "I'm glad you did," he said quietly. "Sometimes I try to imagine what my life would be like if I was still there. If I didn't know about magic or my parents or anything." Severus had wondered the same thing, particularly in his darker moments. What kind of boy would Harry have become under the Dursleys' constant neglect? What kind of wizard, arriving at Hogwarts knowing nothing of his heritage or abilities? "It doesn't bear contemplating," he said firmly. "You're here now. And while your education may be unconventional, I believe it's what you need." Harry nodded, then asked hesitantly, "Do you think my parents would approve of you raising me?" The question caught Severus off guard. "Your mother would," he said after a moment. "She valued education and preparation highly." As for James Potter, Severus couldn't bring himself to speculate. "Your father would want you to be safe and well prepared," he said finally, which was likely true enough. Harry seemed satisfied with this answer. "Can we keep practicing the wandless magic? Even if it's just party tricks for now?" Severus suppressed a smile. "We can. But I expect continued diligence in your other studies as well." "Deal," Harry agreed promptly. "And, thanks for telling me the truth." Not the whole truth, Severus thought. But enough for now. Enough to give the boy context without crushing him under the weight of destiny. "Knowledge is power, Harry," he said simply. "I won't keep it from you without good reason." The day Harry's Hogwarts letter arrived, Severus was supervising him in the preparation of a forgetfulness potion, ironically enough, given the significance of the occasion. The large barn owl swooped through the open kitchen window, dropping the thick parchment envelope directly onto the table beside their cauldron. Harry nearly knocked over a jar of Lethe River water in his excitement. "It's here," he exclaimed, reaching for the letter with potion-stained fingers. "Hands," Severus reminded him automatically. Harry quickly wiped his hands on his apron before picking up the envelope. He read aloud, "Mr. H. Potter, the Blue Bedroom, Spinners End Cottage, Yorkshire." He looked up at Severus, his eyes wide. "They know exactly where I am. Even though it's supposed to be secret. The Hogwarts quill is ancient magic," Severus explained. "It records the name and location of every magical child in Britain at birth. However, the headmaster is the only one with access to that information, and he is aware of our arrangement." Harry nodded, carefully breaking the wax seal and unfolding the letter. His face split into a wide grin as he read the acceptance notice, followed by the list of required books and equipment. "I'm really going," he breathed. "To Hogwarts. Did you doubt it?" Severus asked, arching an eyebrow. "No, but it makes it real." Harry ran a finger over the Hogwarts crest at the top of the parchment. "When can we go shopping for supplies? Can I get my wand now?" "This weekend," Severus promised. "We'll need to take certain precautions, however. Your appearance in Diagon Alley will attract attention." Harry's excitement dimmed slightly. Because of the boy who lived thing? Over the years, Severus had gradually explained Harry's status in the wizarding world, his unfortunate celebrity as the baby who somehow defeated the Dark Lord. Harry had been alternately fascinated and embarrassed by the notion that strangers might recognize him or want to shake his hand. "Precisely," Severus confirmed. "We'll need to disguise you slightly. Nothing dramatic, a charm to temporarily change your hair color should suffice, and perhaps something to conceal your scar." Harry nodded, his excitement returning. "Like a secret mission." "If you wish to think of it that way," Severus said dryly. "Will people recognize you?" Harry asked suddenly. "I mean, if I'm supposed to live with the Dursleys, won't it seem weird that I'm shopping with you?" A perceptive question. "I'm known to be a Hogwarts professor," Severus replied. "It would not be unusual for me to escort a Muggle-raised student to purchase supplies. However, we'll maintain a more formal relationship in public. You should address me as Professor Snape, and I shall call you Mr. Potter." Harry made a face. "That's going to be weird." "Nevertheless, it's necessary," Severus insisted. "Our domestic arrangement must remain private. The headmaster feels, and I agree, that your safety depends on it." "Because of Voldemort's followers?" Harry asked. Severus nodded. "Some avoided imprisonment after the war. Others have children who will be your classmates at Hogwarts. It would be unwise to advertise our connection." Harry looked thoughtful. "So at school, you can't act like you do here." "I cannot," Severus confirmed, something tight forming in his chest at the boy's crestfallen expression. "In public, I must be seen as merely your professor, perhaps taking a particular interest in you because of your mother's talent for potions, but nothing more." "I understand," Harry said, though his voice held disappointment. "It's like undercover work." "An apt analogy," Severus agreed, relieved that Harry was taking this reasonably well. "Now, shall we complete this potion, or would you prefer to abandon it in your excitement?" Harry immediately turned his attention back to the cauldron. "No, let's finish it. I want to get it right before school starts." That was one of the things Severus had come to appreciate most about the boy, his determination to complete what he started, regardless of distractions. It was a quality that would serve him well at Hogwarts. Later that evening, after Harry had gone to bed, clutching his Hogwarts letter on the nightstand beside him, Severus penned a note to Dumbledore. "The letter has arrived. We'll be visiting Diagon Alley this Saturday with appropriate precautions. The boy is excited but handling it well. I've reminded him of our necessary public dynamic. SS." The Hogwarts owl returned shortly with Dumbledore's response, "Excellent. Hagrid is most disappointed not to be the one introducing Harry to the wizarding world, as I originally planned before your intervention. Perhaps allow him to accidentally encounter you both at Diagon Alley. The poor man has been looking forward to meeting James and Lily's son for years." A.D. Severus sighed. Hagrid was loyal to Dumbledore and genuinely good-hearted, but subtlety was not his strong suit. Still, arranging a chance meeting might satisfy the half-giant's curiosity without compromising their story. "A brief encounter can be arranged," he wrote back. "Though I trust you've impressed upon him the importance of discretion regarding the boy's living situation." Dumbledore's reply came quickly. "Hagrid believes Harry has been temporarily removed from his Muggle relatives due to concerns about their reaction to his Hogwarts letter. He knows nothing of your guardianship, only that you've been tasked with preparing Harry for his entry into our world. This explanation satisfies his curiosity without risking our arrangement." A.D. Severus nodded to himself. A plausible cover story. The fewer people who knew the truth, the safer Harry would be. Saturday morning found Harry practically vibrating with anticipation as Severus applied a charm that turned his black hair a nondescript brown and covered his lightning scar with a specialized concealment paste. "How do I look?" Harry asked, peering into the mirror. "Unremarkable," Severus replied, which was precisely the point. "Now remember, in public I call you Professor Snape and act like I barely know you," Harry recited. "And if anyone asks, you're helping me because Headmaster Dumbledore was worried about how my Muggle relatives would react to a Hogwarts letter." "Correct." Severus surveyed him critically. With the altered hair color, less distinctive glasses, and hidden scar, Harry looked like any other 11-year-old wizard. Only those familiar with Lily's eyes might make the connection, and few people paid such close attention to children's eyes. They traveled by Floo powder to the Leaky Cauldron, Harry executing a passable arrival despite it being only his third time using the magical transportation method. "Remember to step out firmly," Severus murmured, steadying the boy with a hand on his shoulder. "Don't linger in the flames." The Leaky Cauldron was crowded with weekend shoppers. Tom the barkeeper nodded respectfully to Severus, who was known but not particularly well-liked among the establishment's regular patrons. "Professor Snape," Tom greeted. "Bit unusual to see you during summer holidays." "Hogwarts business," Severus replied curtly, gesturing to Harry. "Mr. Potter requires assistance with his school supplies." If Tom recognized the name, he showed no sign of it, likely assuming this was some other Potter, not the Harry Potter. "First year at Hogwarts, lad?" he asked kindly. Harry nodded, managing to look appropriately shy and overwhelmed. "Yes, sir." "You've got a fine guide in Professor Snape," Tom said. "Best potions master in Britain, they say." Severus inclined his head slightly at the compliment. "If you'll excuse us, we have much to purchase." They made their way through the pub and into the small courtyard beyond. Severus tapped the appropriate brick with his wand, and the archway to Diagon Alley formed before them. Harry gasped as the Wizarding Street was revealed in all its colorful, chaotic glory. Though Severus had described it to him, nothing could prepare the boy for the reality: the crooked buildings, the displays of cauldrons and broomsticks, the witches and wizards in robes of every color, the magical creatures in shop windows. "It's amazing," he breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. For a moment, Severus saw the alley through Harry's eyes, not as the familiar, somewhat tedious shopping district he'd known for decades, but as a wonderland of magical possibilities. He allowed the boy a moment to gawk before gently steering him forward. "Gringotts first," he said. "You'll need to access your vault." This was something they'd discussed previously. Though Severus had provided for all Harry's needs since taking him in, the Potter vault contained the boy's inheritance, money that rightfully belonged to him and would fund his education. As they approached the imposing white building, Severus murmured, "Remember what I told you about goblins." "Always be polite but direct," Harry recited quietly. "No unnecessary smiling or small talk." They value efficiency and honesty above pleasantries. Correct. Severus was continually impressed by how well Harry retained information. Whether it was potion recipes, magical theory, or social protocols, the boy rarely needed to be told anything twice. The visit to Gringotts went smoothly. The goblin teller accepted Harry's key without comment, and soon they were hurtling through the underground passages in a cart. Harry's vault, when opened, contained substantial piles of gold, silver, and bronze coins, the remains of the Potter family fortune. "This is all mine?" Harry asked, wide-eyed. "It is," Severus confirmed. "Though I suggest taking only what you'll need for school supplies and reasonable spending money for the year. The rest will remain secure." Harry nodded, filling a small pouch with a modest selection of coins. "I've never had my own money before," he said quietly. "Use it wisely," Severus advised. "Neither extravagantly nor miserly." Back in the sunlight of Diagon Alley, they consulted the supply list. "Robes first, I think," Severus decided. "Madame Malkin should be relatively quiet this early in the day." He was right. The robe shop was empty save for Madame Malkin herself, who greeted them cheerfully. "Hogwarts, dear?" she asked Harry. "Got the lot here," another young man being fitted up just now, in fact. She led Harry to the back of the shop, where a pale, blond boy was standing on a footstool while a second which pinned his long black robes. Severus recognized him immediately, Draco Malfoy, Lucius and Narcissa's son. "Hello," Draco said as Harry climbed onto the stool beside him. "Hogwarts too?" "Yes," Harry replied politely, glancing briefly at Severus, who gave him a barely perceptible nod. "My father's next door buying my books and mother's up the street looking at wands," Draco drawled. "Then I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why first years can't have their own. I think I'll bully father into getting me one and I'll smuggle it in somehow." Severus inwardly winced at the boy's entitled tone. Lucius had clearly indulged his son to a fault. "Have you got your own broom?" Draco continued. "Not yet," Harry replied carefully. "Play Quidditch at all?" "I've read about it, but I haven't had the chance to play properly," Harry said honestly. Though Severus had taught him the rules of the wizarding sport and occasionally allowed him to fly on a training broom in their secluded garden, team play hadn't been possible given their isolated lifestyle. "I do, father says it's a crime if I'm not picked to play for my house, and I must say, I agree." "Know what house you'll be in yet?" Harry glanced again at Severus, who remained impassive. They had discussed the Hogwarts houses at length, exploring the qualities and history of each. Severus had been careful not to show favoritism toward Slytherin, wanting Harry to form his own opinions. "Not really," Harry said. "I suppose you won't know until you get there." "Well, no one really knows until they get there, but I know I'll be in Slytherin, all our family have been. Imagine being in Hufflepuff, I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" Before Harry could answer, Madame Malkin said, "That's you done, my dear," and Harry, looking relieved, hopped down from the footstool. "Well, I'll see you at Hogwarts, I suppose," Draco said. Harry nodded politely and rejoined Severus near the front of the shop. "Draco Malfoy," Severus murmured as Madame Malkin fetched Harry's packaged robes. His father was closely associated with the Dark Lord. "Remember that when you encounter him at Hogwarts." He seemed. Harry hesitated, searching for the right word. "Arrogant?" Severus suggested dryly. "I was going to say lonely," Harry replied thoughtfully. "All that talk about what his father says and what his father wants. Reminded me a bit of Dudley, actually." Severus regarded Harry with surprise. It was an unexpectedly perceptive observation for an 11-year-old. "An interesting assessment," he said finally. "Though I would still advise caution in your dealings with him." After collecting Harry's robes, they visited the apothecary, where Severus critically examined every ingredient before allowing the proprietor to package them, the bookshop, where Harry had to be gently discouraged from purchasing advanced texts far beyond the first-year curriculum, and the cauldron shop. Pewter, standard size too, Severus reminded Harry when he lingered over a handsome copper cauldron. The copper reacts unpredictably with certain first-year potions. You can experiment with different cauldron materials when you're more advanced. Harry nodded, accepting the correction easily. After years under Severus's tutelage, he understood the importance of following potion-making protocols. As they emerged from the cauldron shop, a booming voice called out, "Professor Snape. Fancy meetin' you here." Right on cue, Severus thought wryly, turning to see Hagrid's massive form approaching through the crowd. The half-giant beamed at them, his black eyes focusing on Harry with obvious curiosity and excitement. "Hagrid," Severus acknowledged with a nod. "School business, I presume?" Dumbledore sent me ter pick up you-know-what from vault you-know-which," Hagrid replied, tapping the side of his nose conspicuously. He turned his attention fully to Harry. "And this must be young Potter. Pleasure ter meet ya at last." Harry looked momentarily startled that Hagrid had recognized him despite his disguise, but recovered quickly. "Nice to meet you too, sir." Hagrid laughed. "No, sir, needed. Just Hagrid will do. I knew your parents, you know. Wonderful people, both of them." Harry's face brightened. "You did? What were they like?" "Some of the best witch and wizard I ever knew," Hagrid said warmly. "Your dad was a right troublemaker at school, but brave as they come. And your mum, clever and kind, she was. Had a way of seein' the good in everyone." Severus maintained his impassive expression with effort. Hagrid's description of Lily was painfully accurate. "Professor Snape's been telling me about them too," Harry said. "Especially my mum. They were friends when they were kids." Hagrid looked surprised, glancing between Harry and Severus. "Has he now? Well, that's good." He recovered his enthusiasm quickly. "So, got all your school things?" "Almost," Harry replied. "We still need to get my wand." Ollivanders, no place better. Listen, why don't I treat ya to an ice cream after? Celebrate your first trip to Diagon Alley proper." Before Severus could intervene, Harry looked to him questioningly. "Would that be all right, Professor?" Severus considered briefly. The meeting had gone according to Dumbledore's plan, and Hagrid clearly wanted time with Harry. Additionally, it would reinforce their cover story if others observed the Hogwarts gamekeeper taking a friendly interest in a new student. "Very well," he conceded. "We can meet at Florian Fortescue's after you've obtained your wand. I have a brief errand at the apothecary." "Brilliant." Hagrid beamed. "I'll wait outside Ollivander's fair Harry. Let ya have that special moment of gettin' your wand in private, it's a big deal, after all." As Hagrid lumbered off, Harry looked up at Severus. "You're not really going to the apothecary again, are you?" Perceptive as always, Severus said dryly. "No, but it would seem odd if I accompanied you for ice cream with Hagrid. This maintains our cover while allowing you to learn more about your parents from someone who knew them, differently than I did." Harry nodded understanding. "Will he tell me about Hogwarts too?" "Undoubtedly, at great length and with numerous digressions about dangerous creatures he wishes he could keep as pets," Severus replied, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Now, let us procure your wand." This is indeed, as Hagrid said, a significant moment for any young witch or wizard. Ollivander's shop was narrow and shabby, with a single wand displayed on a faded purple cushion in the window. As they entered, a bell rang somewhere in the depths of the shop. Harry looked around with interest at the thousands of narrow boxes piled high to the ceiling. "Good afternoon," said a soft voice. Mr. Ollivander emerged from the shadows, his pale eyes shining like moons in the gloom of the shop. "Hello," Harry said awkwardly. "Ah, yes," Ollivander said. "I've been expecting you, Mr. Potter." Harry shot a startled look at Severus, who stepped forward slightly. Mr. Ollivander. I trust you'll maintain discretion regarding Mr. Potter's visit today. Ollivander's silvery eyes shifted to Severus. Professor Snape. Ebony, 12 inches, dragon heartstring core. Unyielding. A powerful wand for complex magic. His gaze returned to Harry. And yes, of course. The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter. That relationship is sacred and private. For the next half hour, Harry tried wand after wand. Severus watched with growing interest as Ollivander became more excited with each rejection. Tricky customer, eh? Not to worry, we'll find the perfect match here somewhere. Finally, Ollivander presented a wand of holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches. The moment Harry touched it, a stream of red and gold sparks shot from the end like fireworks, illuminating the dusty shop. Curious, Ollivander murmured. Very curious. What's curious? Harry asked. Ollivander fixed Harry with his pale stare. I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single wand. It so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand gave another feather, just one other. It is very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand when its brother, why, its brother gave you that scar. Harry paled slightly. Severus stepped forward, placing a hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. I think that's quite enough, Mr. Ollivander, he said coldly. The wand has chosen. We'll take it. Ollivander bowed slightly. Of course, of course. But remember, the wand chooses the wizard. I think we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things, terrible, yes, but great. As they left the shop, Harry clutched his wand box tightly, looking troubled. Professor, he said quietly, what does it mean that my wand is connected to Voldemort's? It means very little, Severus replied firmly. Wand lore is an imprecise branch of magic. Phoenix feathers are particularly powerful cores, and it's not surprising that two powerful wizards might be matched with wands of similar components. But Ollivander seemed to think it was important. Ollivander is eccentric, Severus said carefully. He sees patterns and connections where others might not. But a wand is ultimately a tool, Harry. Its character comes from the wizard who wields it, not from its components. Harry nodded, though he still looked unsettled. So it doesn't mean I'm, like him? Like Voldemort? Severus stopped walking and turned to face the boy fully. Listen to me carefully, Harry. You are nothing like the Dark Lord. Nothing. A shared wand core doesn't change who you are or who you will become. That is determined by your choices, your values, your heart. And in those things, you could not be more different from him. The intensity in Severus's voice seemed to reassure Harry. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Thanks, he said quietly. I needed to hear that. It's merely the truth, Severus replied, resuming their walk toward Florian Fortescue's, where Hagrid could be seen waiting outside. Now, enjoy your ice cream with Hagrid. Ask him about your father's Quidditch exploits, he'll be delighted to tell you. I'll meet you back here in 1 hour. Harry nodded, his excitement returning as he spotted Hagrid waving enthusiastically. 1 hour, he confirmed before hurrying off. Severus watched him go, feeling an unexpected pang at the separation. Soon, Harry would be at Hogwarts, surrounded by other children, forming friendships and rivalries, navigating the complexities of school life largely without Severus's direct guidance. Their relationship would necessarily change, becoming more formal in public while maintaining their closer bond in private. It was the right progression, the boy needed to develop independence and forge his own path. But Severus couldn't help feeling that something precious was coming to an end. The quiet evenings of reading by the fire, the weekends spent experimenting with potions, the gradual building of trust between them, all would be replaced by something new and undefined. With a sigh, Severus turned and made his way to Flourish and Blotts. He truly did have an errand, not at the apothecary, but at the bookshop. He'd noticed Harry eyeing a particular volume on magical defensive theory, and while it was beyond the first-year curriculum, it would make an appropriate parting gift. A reminder that, though their relationship must change, the bond they'd formed over the past 5 years remained intact. The final weeks of summer passed in a flurry of preparation. Harry packed and repacked his trunk multiple times, studied his textbooks with growing excitement, and practiced basic potion techniques until Severus assured him he was more than prepared for first-year work. "You could likely pass the first-term examinations already," Severus told him one evening as they reviewed the properties of asphodel. "Though I expect you to continue applying yourself diligently. Complacency leads to carelessness." "I know," Harry said. "I won't embarrass you, Professor." Severus raised an eyebrow. "Is that your concern? That your performance will reflect poorly on me?" Harry shrugged. "Well, you've taught me so much. If I mess up, people might think you're a bad teacher. I assure you, the dunderheads I normally teach have thoroughly established my reputation, for better or worse," Severus said dryly. "Your success or failure will be your own, Harry. Though I have little doubt which it will be, given your aptitude." The night before September 1st, they sat together in the cottage's small sitting room, the fire crackling softly as summer rain pattered against the windows. Harry's trunk stood packed and ready by the door. Hedwig, a snowy owl Severus had purchased as a surprise birthday present, dozed in her cage nearby. "Everything's going to be different tomorrow," Harry said quietly, looking into the flames. "Yes," Severus agreed. "But not entirely. Some things remain constant, regardless of circumstance." Harry looked up at him. "Like what?" Severus considered his words carefully. "Like the fact that you are prepared for what lies ahead. Like the knowledge you've gained. Like, my commitment to your well-being, regardless of how I must appear to others at Hogwarts." Harry nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about the sorting," he admitted. "What if I'm put in Slytherin? Everyone seems to think I'll be in Gryffindor like my parents." "The sorting hat considers your qualities and preferences," Severus replied. "Not your parentage or others' expectations. Whatever house you're placed in will be the right one for you. Even Slytherin?" Harry pressed. "I know you're the head of Slytherin, but people talk about it like it's the bad house. And Voldemort was in Slytherin." "Slytherin has produced its share of dark wizards," Severus acknowledged. "But also great healers, inventors, and leaders. Ambition and cunning are not inherently negative traits, they can be channeled toward worthy goals. Just as Gryffindor courage can be reckless foolhardiness, or Ravenclaw intelligence can become cold intellectualism." Harry considered this. "So you wouldn't be disappointed if I wasn't in Slytherin?" Severus felt something twist in his chest at the uncertainty in the boy's voice. "Harry," he said seriously, "I would not be disappointed regardless of which house you are sorted into. Each has its merits, each its pitfalls. My concern is not with your house affiliation but with your growth as a wizard and as a person." Harry relaxed visibly. "Thanks," he said softly. "That helps." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire slowly burning down to embers. Finally, Severus cleared his throat. "It's late. You should get some rest before tomorrow." Harry nodded but made no move to stand. "Can I ask one more thing?" "You may." "At Hogwarts. I know you have to be different with me in public. But will we still will I still get to talk to you? Like this?" Severus had been considering this question for months. The need for secrecy was paramount, but he was unwilling to abandon the relationship they'd built over 5 years. "My office hours are held on Tuesday and Thursday evenings," he said carefully. "Any student may seek academic assistance during those times. Additionally, as your head of house, should you be sorted into Slytherin, or simply as a faculty member concerned with your adjustment to Hogwarts, it would not be unusual for me to schedule periodic meetings to discuss your progress." Harry brightened. "So we can still talk?" With certain precautions, yes, Severus confirmed. My office is warded against eavesdropping, and I can implement additional security measures for our conversations. However, we must be discreet about the frequency and nature of our meetings. I understand, Harry said, clearly relieved. I was worried that once we got to Hogwarts, everything would just stop. Some adjustments will be necessary, Severus said, but the foundation remains unchanged. Now, off to bed. Tomorrow will be eventful enough without adding exhaustion. Harry stood, hesitating briefly before stepping forward and wrapping his arms around Severus in a quick, awkward hug. Good night, Professor. And, thanks. For everything. Before Severus could respond, Harry hurried from the room, leaving him momentarily stunned by the unexpected gesture. In 5 years, he could count on one hand the number of times the boy had initiated physical contact of that nature. Good night, Harry, he said softly to the empty room. King's Cross Station bustled with the usual mix of harried commuters, confused tourists, and, visible only to those who knew what to look for, wizarding families trying to inconspicuously access platform 9 3/4. Severus and Harry had arrived separately as a precaution. Severus, already in his teaching robes, had apparat directly to the platform, while Harry had taken the night bus, arriving at the Muggle portion of the station like any other Hogwarts student. His hair had been returned to its natural black, though a mild concealment charm still hid his scar. Severus watched from a discreet distance as Harry navigated the barrier between platforms 9 and 10, pushing his trolley with Hedwig's cage balanced precariously atop his trunk. The boy disappeared seamlessly through the solid-seeming wall, emerging moments later onto platform 9 3/4. Harry's eyes widened as he took in the scarlet Hogwarts Express, steam billowing from its engine, and the hundreds of students and parents crowding the platform. For all their preparation, nothing could fully prepare a child for their first glimpse of the magical train and the cacophony of a platform full of wizarding families. Keeping to their plan, Severus made no move to approach Harry. Instead, he observed as the boy found an empty compartment toward the back of the train, struggling slightly to lift his trunk onto the luggage rack until a pair of red-headed twins, Weasleys, undoubtedly, offered their assistance. Once Harry was settled, Severus made his way to the faculty compartment at the front of the train, nodding curtly to Professor McGonagall, who was already seated with the latest issue of Transfiguration today. Severus, she greeted. Ready for another year? As ready as one can be for the inevitable parade of incompetence, he replied dryly. McGonagall's lips twitched. Such enthusiasm. I understand Harry Potter will be joining us this year. Severus stiffened slightly. So the class roster indicates. Albus mentioned you've had some contact with the boy, McGonagall pressed. Preparing him for the transition to our world. Limited contact, Severus said carefully. The headmaster felt someone should ensure the boy wasn't completely ignorant of his heritage, given his Muggle upbringing. And how did you find him? McGonagall asked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. Adequately intelligent, Severus replied noncommittally. Less arrogant than might be expected, given his celebrity. McGonagall studied him for a moment. High praise, coming from you. Severus merely raised an eyebrow and opened the latest edition of Potions Quarterly, effectively ending the conversation. McGonagall returned to her own reading, though Severus could feel her occasional glance in his direction. The journey to Hogwarts passed uneventfully. Severus used the time to review his lesson plans for the coming term and to prepare mentally for the changed dynamic with Harry. The easy familiarity of the cottage would be replaced by the formal professor-student relationship, at least in public. It would be an adjustment for both of them. As the train approached Hogsmeade Station, Severus changed into fresh teaching robes and prepared to disembark ahead of the students. Through the window, he caught a glimpse of Harry on the platform, looking both nervous and excited as Hagrid called for first years to follow him to the boats. Good luck, Harry, he murmured under his breath as he made his way toward the waiting carriages, the Thestrals visible to him as they were to all who had witnessed death. The great hall was already prepared for the welcome feast when Severus took his usual seat at the high table. Enchanted candles floated beneath the ceiling, which reflected the clear night sky outside. The 4 house tables stood empty, awaiting the returning students who would soon pour in from the entrance hall. Professor Flitwick engaged Severus in discussion about a recent article in Potions Quarterly, but Severus found his attention repeatedly drawn to the great doors, waiting for the first years to enter. Finally, the upper years had settled, and McGonagall led in the line of new students, their faces a mixture of awe, nerves, and excitement as they gazed around the magnificent hall. Severus spotted Harry immediately. The boy walked beside a tall, gangling redhead, another Weasley, no doubt, and appeared to be listening intently as the other boy whispered something to him. Harry's expression was composed, though Severus could read the tension in his shoulders. As the first years gathered before the sorting hat, Severus allowed himself a brief moment of, not pride, exactly, but something adjacent to it. The small, uncertain child from Privet Drive had become this confident young wizard, standing straight-backed among his peers, prepared for whatever lay ahead. The sorting began. Severus paid minimal attention to the first few students, his focus narrowed to Harry, who watched each sorting with obvious interest. When Granger, Hermione, was sorted into Gryffindor after a brief deliberation, Severus noted Harry's small nod of approval. The girl had apparently made an impression during the train journey. Malfoy, Draco, was sorted into Slytherin the instant the hat touched his blonde hair, no surprise there. The boy swaggered to the Slytherin table, looking immensely pleased with himself. Finally, McGonagall called, "Potter, Harry." A hush fell over the great hall, followed by an outbreak of whispers as Harry stepped forward. Many students craned their necks for a better view of the famous boy who lived. Harry sat on the stool, and McGonagall placed the sorting hat on his head. Severus watched intently as the boy's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, consideration, and what appeared to be an internal dialogue with the hat. The sorting took longer than most, stretching to nearly a minute before the hat finally opened its brim. "Gryffindor," it shouted. The Gryffindor table erupted in the loudest cheers yet, the Weasley twins chanting, "We got Potter! We got Potter!" As Harry, looking relieved and pleased, made his way to join his new housemates. Severus maintained his impassive expression, though he felt a complicated mix of emotions. A small part of him had hoped for Slytherin, where he could more easily keep a direct eye on the boy. Yet he couldn't deny that Gryffindor was fitting. Harry had shown courage and determination from the moment Severus had taken him from Privet Drive. More importantly, the boy appeared genuinely happy with his placement. As Harry settled at the Gryffindor table, accepting congratulations and introductions, he glanced briefly toward the high table. His eyes met Severus's for just a moment. Severus gave him a nearly imperceptible nod. Harry's lips quirked in a small, private smile before he turned his attention back to his new housemates. Later, as the feast concluded and the prefects prepared to lead first years to their dormitories, Severus found himself approached by Dumbledore, who had wandered down from his central position at the high table. "A fine sorting, wouldn't you say?" the headmaster commented, his eyes twinkling. "The hat appeared to function as intended," Severus replied neutrally. Dumbledore chuckled. "Come now, Severus. Surely you have some thoughts on young Harry's placement." "Gryffindor is appropriate," Severus conceded. "The boy has demonstrated certain traits consistent with the house." "Indeed," Dumbledore agreed. "Though I confess, I half expected the hat to place him in Slytherin, given his unconventional upbringing these past 5 years. Severus raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting I attempted to influence his sorting, headmaster?" "Not at all," Dumbledore replied mildly. "Merely observing that nurture can sometimes impact nature in unexpected ways. But perhaps Harry's inherent character was always meant for Gryffindor, regardless of circumstances." "Perhaps," Severus allowed. "Or perhaps the hat recognized that Gryffindor would provide him with certain protective advantages. The Dark Lord's remaining supporters are unlikely to look favorably upon the boy who lived, and few of them have children in Gryffindor House. A pragmatic observation, Dumbledore said thoughtfully. Worthy of a Slytherin. Severus inclined his head slightly, accepting the oblique compliment. If you'll excuse me, headmaster, I should address my new Slytherins before curfew. As he made his way out of the great hall, Severus caught one last glimpse of Harry, laughing at something the Weasley boy had said, surrounded by his new housemates. The boy looked happy. At home. A new chapter had begun for both of them. Their relationship would change, evolve, adapt to the constraints and opportunities of Hogwarts. But the foundation they'd built over 5 years remained solid, a foundation of trust, mutual respect, and a promise kept. For the first time in many years, Severus felt something like optimism about the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Harry wouldn't face them alone. Severus would keep his promise, not just to Lily now, but to Harry himself. To protect him, guide him, prepare him. And perhaps, in the process, redeem them both. Chapter 3, Hidden Threats. Harry Potter sat frozen at his desk in the potions classroom, painfully aware of every eye on him. Professor Snape loomed over him, black eyes glittering dangerously. Fame clearly isn't everything, Snape sneered, his lip curling. Did you think you wouldn't need to open a book before coming to my class, Potter? That your celebrity status exempts you from the work required of other students? Harry swallowed hard. No, sir. Tell me, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Harry blinked in surprise. This was a test, not of his knowledge, but of his ability to play along with their charade. Draught of living death, sir, he answered carefully, not too quickly. It's a powerful sleeping potion. Something flickered in Snape's eyes, approval, perhaps, before his scowl deepened. Correct. And where, Potter, would you look if I asked you to find me a bezoar? In the stomach of a goat, sir. It protects against most poisons. Snape's nostrils flared. And the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane? They're the same plant, sir. Also called aconite. The potion's master stared at him for a long, tense moment. Harry could feel Ron shifting uncomfortably beside him and Hermione practically vibrating with unraised hand at the next table. Apparently fame isn't completely without merit, Snape finally said coldly. 1 point to Gryffindor for basic preparation. He turned sharply. Well? Why aren't you all writing this down? There was a sudden scramble for quills and parchment. Harry released the breath he'd been holding, catching the briefest twitch at the corner of Snape's mouth as the professor turned away. And just like that, Harry understood. This performance, Snape's hostility, Harry's restraint, established their public dynamic perfectly. No one would suspect their true relationship now. Later, as they filed out of the classroom, Ron punched his shoulder lightly. Blimey, Harry. How'd you know all that stuff? Snape looked like he swallowed something nasty when he had to give Gryffindor a point. Harry shrugged. Just read ahead a bit. Mental, that's what you are, Ron said, shaking his head. But brilliant timing. Did you see Malfoy's face? He thought Snape was going to demolish you. Snape's still a git though, Harry added quickly, feeling guilty but knowing it was necessary. The way he swept in like an overgrown bat. Ron laughed, and Harry relaxed slightly. His first test in maintaining their secret had been passed. Acceptable performance, Snape said 2 evenings later. They sat in his office, protected by privacy wards and a cover story about remedial potions work. Though perhaps you answered my questions too accurately. Harry grinned. Should I have pretended not to know about bezoars? Perhaps missed one question, Snape suggested, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. You're meant to be raised by muggles, not apprenticed to a potions master. I'll try to look more confused next time, Harry promised. Maybe mispronounce an ingredient. Don't overdo it, Snape warned. Now, tell me about your first week. Your real impressions, not what you tell your housemates. Harry relaxed into his chair, the tension of maintaining his public persona melting away. It's brilliant, mostly. Transfiguration is fascinating, Professor McGonagall strict but fair. Charms is fun. History of magic would be interesting if Professor Binns didn't make it sound like a shipping forecast. He hesitated. Defense against the dark arts is strange. Snape's expression sharpened. Strange how? Professor Quirrell seemed scared of his own shadow. Jumps at everything, can barely get through a sentence without stuttering. Harry frowned. But sometimes I get this feeling he's watching me when I'm not looking. And my scar hurt once when he turned his back. Snape leaned forward. Your scar hurt? When exactly? During our first lesson. He was writing something on the board, and suddenly my scar felt like someone pressed a hot wire against it. Just for a second. Snape's face remained impassive, but Harry, who knew him well, recognized the subtle tightening around his eyes that indicated concern. Has this happened at any other time? Harry shook his head. No. Just that once. Inform me immediately if it occurs again, Snape said. And be cautious around Quirrell. Don't be alone with him if possible. You think he might be dangerous? Harry asked, surprised. But he seems so pathetic. Appearances can be deceiving, Snape said. It's a lesson worth learning early. Harry nodded slowly. Is that why you pretend to hate me in public? Keeping up appearances. That, and to maintain your cover with your housemates, Snape replied. The children of certain, former associates of the Dark Lord would report any favorable treatment of you to their parents. Like Malfoy, Harry guessed. Among others. Speaking of which, how are you finding your classmates? Harry grinned. Ron's brilliant, bit chess-obsessed and hates homework, but loyal. Hermione Granger's scary smart but needs to relax a bit. Neville's nice but terrified of you. As he should be, Snape said dryly. And the Slytherins? Malfoy's a pain, strutting around like he owns the place. Keeps making comments about my parents. Harry paused, watching Snape carefully. He said my father was worthless. Something flickered across Snape's face, an old, complicated emotion. Your father and I had our differences, he said carefully, but James Potter was not worthless. He fought bravely against the Dark Lord and died protecting you and your mother. Thanks, Harry said quietly. I know it's not easy for you to say that. Snape inclined his head slightly. The truth rarely conforms to our personal preferences. He glanced at the clock on his desk. It's nearly curfew. We should conclude for tonight. Harry stood reluctantly. These private meetings were precious, brief windows where he could be himself, not the boy who lived or the first-year Gryffindor pretending not to know his potions professor. Remember, Snape said as Harry reached the door, caution with Quirrell. And inform me immediately of any further discomfort. I will, Harry promised. September faded into October, and Harry settled into the rhythm of Hogwarts life. During the day, he attended classes, played Exploding Snap in the Gryffindor common room, and worked on assignments with Ron and Hermione, who had become their friend after an incident involving a mountain troll that had both terrified and bonded them. At night, he sometimes slipped away to Snape's office, maintaining the fiction of remedial potions work. One evening in mid-October, Harry arrived for his detention to find Snape looking unusually grim. Something's happened, Harry guessed as soon as the privacy wards were in place. Snape nodded. There was a break-in at Gringotts on your birthday. The information was kept quiet, but I've confirmed that the target was a high-security vault that had been emptied earlier that day. Emptied by who? By Hagrid, on Dumbledore's orders, Snape said. He collected a small package, the only item in the vault. Harry's eyes widened. The you-know-what from Vault You-Know-Which, he mentioned in Diagon Alley. Precisely. That package is now hidden within Hogwarts, behind a series of protections created by the faculty. What is it? Harry asked eagerly. Snape raised an eyebrow. If I told you that, it would rather defeat the purpose of keeping it secret, wouldn't it? But you think it's in danger, Harry persisted. That's why you're telling me this much. I believe, Snape said carefully, that whoever attempted to rob Gringotts may now target Hogwarts. And I believe you should be particularly vigilant as a result. Harry frowned. You think they'll come after me too? Why? What's the connection? Snape hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. The item in question would be extremely valuable to anyone seeking to regain lost power, he said finally. Including the Dark Lord, should he find a way to return. Harry's blood ran cold. You think Voldemort is behind the break-in? I think it would be foolish to rule out the possibility, Snape replied. Which brings me back to Professor Quirrell and your scar. You think Quirrell is working for Voldemort? Harry asked incredulously. I think, Snape said precisely, that Quirrell's behavior changed significantly after his sabbatical year. He was never particularly impressive, but he wasn't the trembling, stuttering wreck he now appears to be. Something happened during his travels. Harry thought about this. So the stuttering could be an act. It's a possibility we can't dismiss. Snape's expression turned even more serious. Harry, I want your word that you won't go looking for trouble. Leave the investigation of these matters to me. But if Voldemort, your word, Harry, Snape interrupted firmly. You're 11 years old. No matter how well prepared you may be, you are not equipped to face the Dark Lord or his agents. Harry wanted to argue but recognized the concern behind Snape's stern expression. I promise I won't go looking for trouble, he said reluctantly. But trouble has a way of finding me. Indeed, Snape said dryly. Which is why I'm telling you this much, so you'll be prepared if it does. Now, we should maintain appearances. Review the properties of the ingredients for next week's swelling solution. As Harry recited the properties of pufferfish eyes and dried nettles, his mind raced with the new information. A mysterious package, a Gringotts break-in, and the possibility that Quirrell was somehow connected to Voldemort. Despite his promise, Harry couldn't help feeling that this mystery needed solving. The third-floor corridor is out of bounds to anyone who doesn't want to die a painful death, Hermione quoted thoughtfully. Do you think that's where they're keeping whatever Hagrid took from Gringotts? They sat in a corner of the library, voices low. Harry had shared a carefully edited version of what he knew, presenting it as things he'd overheard or deduced rather than information from Snape. Makes sense, Ron agreed. But what could be so valuable it needs that kind of protection? Something magical and powerful, Harry suggested. Something Voldemort would want. Ron flinched at the name. Don't say his name, he hissed. Sorry, Harry apologized automatically, though years with Snape had taught him that fear of a name only increased fear of the thing itself. It must be incredibly valuable or dangerous, Hermione mused. Or both. Whatever it is, someone's trying to steal it, Harry said. And I think Quirrell might be involved. Ron looked skeptical. Quirrell. He's afraid of his own shadow. Maybe that's the point, Harry argued. Who'd suspect him? But Professor Quirrell is a teacher, Hermione protested. Dumbledore wouldn't hire someone dangerous. Harry thought about mentioning his scar hurting but decided against it. It sounded too strange, too tenuous a connection. Just keep an eye on him, he said instead. Something's not right there. Their research was interrupted by the arrival of Hagrid, who'd spotted them from another aisle. What are you three up to? He asked cheerfully, hiding something behind his back. Not still looking for Nicholas Flamel, are ye? Harry exchanged startled glances with Ron and Hermione. They hadn't been looking for anyone named Flamel, but Hagrid's slip was obviously significant. Who's Nicholas Flamel? Harry asked innocently. Hagrid looked furious with himself. Forget I said that. Forget it. After he'd hurried away, Hermione turned to them with bright eyes. Nicholas Flamel. That gives us something specific to research. Who do you reckon he is? Ron asked. No idea, Harry admitted. But I bet whatever's being hidden has something to do with him. Despite his promise to Snape, Harry couldn't resist the mystery. He told himself he wasn't technically looking for trouble, just information. And knowledge was never a bad thing, right? The first Quidditch match of the season, Gryffindor vs. Slytherin, arrived on a cold, clear November morning. Harry walked onto the pitch with the rest of the Gryffindor team, his Nimbus 2000, a gift from Professor McGonagall after he'd been made Seeker, clutched in his hand. In the stands, he spotted Ron and Hermione holding a banner, and higher up, the teacher's box where Snape sat beside Quirrell. The potions master gave no sign of recognition, but Harry knew he would be watching closely. As the match began, Harry soared high above the pitch, searching for the golden snitch while keeping one eye on the Slytherin seeker, Terence Higgs. The game was fast and brutal, with the Slytherins using every dirty tactic they could get away with. Harry was circling the goalposts when it happened. His broom gave a sudden, violent lurch. He gripped the handle tightly, thinking he'd caught a strange gust of wind, but then it happened again. The Nimbus was zigzagging through the air, making wild, jerking movements that nearly unseated him. No one seemed to notice at first, all eyes were on the chasers. Then someone in the crowd pointed, and soon everyone was watching as Harry's broom rolled over and over, with him barely holding on. The Nimbus started vibrating so hard it was almost impossible to hang on. Through a gap in the crowd, Harry glimpsed the teacher's stands. Quirrell was staring fixedly at him, lips moving rapidly. Beside him, Snape was doing the same, his dark eyes never leaving Harry. Suddenly, Harry understood, someone was jinxing his broom. And Snape was trying to counter it. The Nimbus continued its violent jerking, climbing higher and higher away from the pitch. The crowd gasped as Harry swung off, now dangling from the broom with just one hand. In the stands, Hermione had reached the same conclusion as Harry. She pushed her way toward the teacher's row, knocking over Professor Flitwick in her haste. Reaching Quirrell, she crouched down and lit his robes with the same magical blue flame she'd perfected for carrying in jars during cold days. It took about 30 seconds for Quirrell to realize he was on fire. His sudden yelp broke his concentration, and his eye contact with Harry's broom. In the confusion, Hermione also knocked into Snape, breaking his counterjinx too. But it was enough. The damage to Quirrell's concentration allowed Harry to swing back aboard his Nimbus, which had stopped trying to buck him off. Determined not to let the incident ruin his first match, Harry dived toward a flash of gold near the ground. The Slytherin Seeker was closer, but Harry's Nimbus was faster. Neck and neck, they hurtled toward the snitch, until Harry stood up on his broom, stepped forward, and toppled off. He hit the ground on all fours, coughed, and something gold fell into his hand. "I've got the snitch," he shouted, waving it above his head. The game ended in complete confusion, with Slytherins howling that he hadn't caught the snitch but nearly swallowed it, but it didn't matter. Harry hadn't broken any rules. Later, in Hagrid's hut, Harry sat with Ron and Hermione as they debated what had happened. "It was Snape," Ron insisted. "Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing your broomstick, muttering, wouldn't take his eyes off you." "Rubbish," said Hagrid. "Why would Snape do something like that?" Harry hesitated. He knew Snape had been trying to help, not harm him, but he couldn't say that without revealing too much. "I found out something about him," he said instead, improvising. "He tried to get past that three-headed dog on Halloween. It bit him. I think he's trying to steal whatever it's guarding." Hagrid dropped his teapot. "How do you know about Fluffy?" "Fluffy?" Ron said incredulously. "Yeah, he's mine, bought him off a Greek chappie I met in a pub last year. I lent him to Dumbledore to guard the—" "Yes," said Harry eagerly. "Now, don't ask me any more," said Hagrid gruffly. "That's top secret, that is. But Snape's trying to steal it." Rubbish, said Hagrid again. Snape's a Hogwarts teacher, he'd do nothing of the sort. So why did he just try to kill Harry? Cried Hermione. Harry winced internally at the accusation but kept his expression neutral. I know a jinx when I see one, Hagrid, Hermione continued. I've read all about them. You've got to keep eye contact, and Snape wasn't blinking. I'm tellin', yeah, you're wrong, said Hagrid hotly. Quirrell was there too, wasn't he? Why suspect Snape? Harry seized the opening. Yeah, Quirrell was there. And my broom stopped acting up right after Hermione distracted him. Ron and Hermione looked at him in surprise. Are you saying Quirrell was jinxing your broom, not Snape? Hermione asked skeptically. I'm saying we should consider all possibilities, Harry said carefully. Who would you suspect if you were trying to steal something? The scary potions master who everyone already thinks is evil, or the stuttering defense teacher who seems afraid of his own shadow? Hagrid was nodding vigorously. See? Makes no sense to jump to conclusions. Ron still looked unconvinced, but Hermione was thoughtful. That's, actually logical, Harry. The perfect cover would be appearing harmless. Exactly, Harry said, relieved. Plus, Quirrell's the defense against the dark arts teacher. He'd know all about jinxes and how to use them. But what about Snape's injury from the dog? Ron asked. That's suspicious. Harry thought quickly. Maybe he was checking on the protections. Making sure they were secure. He'd need to warn Snape that his friend suspected him. And he'd need to find out if Snape had actually confronted Fluffy on Halloween. There was more going on than even Harry realized. You're telling me Hagrid named that monster Fluffy? Snape pinched the bridge of his nose, looking pained. They were in his office again, privacy wards firmly in place. Harry nodded. And it's guarding whatever was in that Gringotts vault. So was Quirrell really jinxing my broom? And did you really get bitten by Fluffy on Halloween? Yes to both questions, Snape confirmed grimly. Quirrell was indeed jinxing your broom, and I was attempting a counter-jinx. As for the three-headed dog, I was checking on the stone after the troll incident, suspicious that it might have been a diversion. The stone? Harry caught the slip immediately. Snape sighed. The Philosopher's Stone, created by Nicholas Flamel. I suppose you would have discovered that eventually, given your newfound research habits. Harry's eyes widened. The Philosopher's Stone? But that can turn metal into gold and make the elixir of life. I see you paid attention in our discussions of legendary magical artifacts, Snape said dryly. So Voldemort wants it to come back to life, Harry realized. And you think Quirrell is helping him? I believe, Snape said carefully, that Quirrell may be more than simply helping the Dark Lord. But I lack proof, and Dumbledore counsels caution. Harry frowned. What do you mean, more than helping? Snape seemed to debate with himself before answering. There are methods by which a wizard might sustain himself without a proper body. Possession is one such method. You think Voldemort is possessing Quirrell? Harry asked, aghast. Like, he's in there with him. It would explain certain anomalies, Snape said. The change in Quirrell's behavior after his sabbatical, your Scar's reaction to his presence, his sudden interest in the stone. Harry felt sick. So I've been in class with Voldemort all this time. Learning defense from him. If I'm correct, Snape said. Which is why I've been insisting you avoid being alone with Quirrell. And why I would strongly prefer you leave this investigation to me. But if Voldemort's after the stone, we need to stop him. We? Snape raised an eyebrow. There is no we in this scenario, Harry. There is you, an 11-year-old student, and there are the Hogwarts faculty, trained wizards responsible for your safety and the security of the stone. Harry crossed his arms stubbornly. I'm not just any 11-year-old. I survived Voldemort once already. As an infant, through your mother's protection, not through any action of your own, Snape reminded him sharply. Do not confuse luck with skill. Harry's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. I'm not useless. You've been training me for years. I've been providing you with a foundation, Snape corrected. A foundation that will serve you well in the future, but does not yet make you capable of confronting the Dark Lord. They glared at each other for a long moment, neither willing to back down. Finally, Snape sighed. Your desire to help is commendable, he said, visibly making an effort to soften his tone. But reckless action now could undo years of preparation. The stone is well protected. Dumbledore is aware of potential threats. Your task is to focus on your studies and stay safe. And if the protections fail? Harry challenged. If Quirrell gets past them? Then Dumbledore will deal with him, Snape said firmly. The headmaster is the one wizard the Dark Lord always feared, with good reason. Harry wasn't entirely convinced, but he recognized the concern behind Snape's stern expression. Fine, he conceded reluctantly. But I want you to keep me informed. No more secrets. I will tell you what you need to know, Snape countered. Not necessarily everything I know. Harry rolled his eyes. That's basically the same as keeping secrets. It's called exercising judgment, Snape replied, though the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. A concept you might familiarize yourself with before your next Quidditch match. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Snape said dryly, that nearly swallowing the snitch is perhaps not the most dignified way to win a game. Though I must admit, the expressions on my Slytherins' faces were memorable. Harry grinned, the tension broken. You should have seen Malfoy. He looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. An improvement on his usual expression, then, Snape murmured, and Harry laughed out loud. These moments, when Snape's dry humor emerged, when they could speak freely, made the pretense of mutual dislike in public bearable. It reminded Harry that beneath the scary potions master facade was the man who had rescued him from the Dursleys, who had patiently taught him about the wizarding world, who had promised to protect him. Even if they disagreed about how to handle Quirrell and the stone. As Christmas approached, Hogwarts transformed into a winter wonderland. Hagrid dragged 12 enormous fir trees into the Great Hall, Professor Flitwick decorated them with golden bubbles and enchanted icicles, and magical snow fell from the enchanted ceiling, disappearing before it reached the tables. Harry signed up to stay at Hogwarts over the holidays, along with the Weasleys, whose parents were visiting their brother Charlie in Romania. Hermione was heading home to her parents, promising to search for information on Nicholas Flamel in non-magical libraries. We'll check the restricted section while you're gone, Ron assured her as they walked back from their last herbology class of the term. There's got to be something there about Flamel. Just be careful, Hermione cautioned. If Quirrell really is after the stone, you don't want him realizing you're investigating. Harry nodded, thinking of his promise to Snape. He'd been careful not to go looking for direct trouble, but researching Flamel didn't really count as dangerous, did it? He was still pondering this when they turned a corner and found the corridor ahead blocked by an enormous fir tree. Two familiar large feet and loud puffing sounds indicated Hagrid was behind it. Hi, Hagrid, want any help? Ron asked, sticking his head through the branches. Nah, I'm all right, thanks, Ron. Would you mind moving out of the way? Came Malfoy's cold drawl from behind them. Are you trying to earn some extra money, Weasley? Hoping to be gamekeeper yourself when you leave Hogwarts, I suppose. That hut of Hagrid's must seem like a palace compared to what your family's used to. Ron dived at Malfoy just as Snape came up the stairs. Weasley. Ron let go of Malfoy's robes. He was provoked, Professor Snape, said Hagrid, sticking his huge hairy face out from behind the tree. Malfoy was insulting his family. Be that as it may, fighting is against Hogwarts rules, Hagrid, said Snape silkily. 5 points from Gryffindor, Weasley, and be grateful it isn't more. Move along, all of you. Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle pushed roughly past the tree, scattering needles everywhere and smirking. "I'll get him," said Ron, grinding his teeth at Malfoy's back. "One of these days, I'll get him. I hate them both," said Harry, Malfoy and Snape. "Come on, cheer up, it's nearly Christmas," said Hagrid. "Tell ya what, come with me and see the Great Hall, looks a treat." Harry followed, playing his part in public while privately noting that Snape's punishment had actually been quite mild. Had it been any other Gryffindor, the point deduction would likely have been doubled. The Great Hall looked spectacular. Festoons of holly and mistletoe hung all around the walls, and the 12 Christmas trees glittered with golden bubbles, shimmering icicles, and tiny enchanted candles. "How many days you got left until your holidays?" Hagrid asked. "Just one," said Hermione. "And that reminds me, Harry, Ron, we've got half an hour before lunch, we should be in the library." "Oh yeah, you're right," said Ron, tearing his eyes away from Professor Flitwick, who was decorating a tree with golden bubbles blossoming from his wand. "The library," said Hagrid, following them out of the hall. "Just before the holidays? Bit keen, aren't ya?" "Oh, we're not working," Harry told him brightly. "Ever since you mentioned Nicholas Flamel we've been trying to find out who he is." "You what?" Hagrid looked shocked. "Listen here, I've told ya, drop it. It's nothin' to you what that dog's garden dot. We just want to know who Nicholas Flamel is, that's all," said Hermione. "Unless you'd like to tell us and save us the trouble," Harry added hopefully. "We must have been through hundreds of books already and we can't find him anywhere. Just give us a hint, I know I've read his name somewhere." "I'm sayin' nothin'," said Hagrid flatly. "Just have to find out for ourselves, then," said Ron, and they left Hagrid looking disgruntled as they hurried off to the library. Christmas morning dawned cold and white. Harry woke to find a pile of packages at the foot of his bed, more than he'd expected. "Happy Christmas," said Ron sleepily as Harry scrambled out of bed and pulled on his bathrobe. "You, too," said Harry. "Will you look at this? I've got presents." "What did you expect, turnips?" said Ron, turning to his own pile, which was a lot bigger than Harry's. Harry picked up the top parcel. It was wrapped in thick brown paper and scrawled across it was to Harry, from Hagrid. Inside was a roughly cut wooden flute that Hagrid had obviously whittled himself. Next came a lumpy package that turned out to be a hand-knitted sweater from Mrs. Weasley, along with a large box of homemade fudge. There was a large box of chocolate frogs from Hermione, and even a small, unsigned package containing a 50-pence piece, clearly from the Dursleys. At the bottom of the pile was a long, thin package. Harry unwrapped it curiously and gasped as a magnificent, gleaming broomstick rolled out onto his bedspread. A small card fell out, "For emergencies only. Keep it hidden." Harry quickly stuffed the card in his pocket before Ron could see it. "A Nimbus 2000. He exclaimed, partly to distract Ron from the card. "But I've already got one, who would send me another?" Ron examined the broomstick. "No note? Nothing? Maybe it's from Dumbledore," Harry suggested, thinking fast. "He gave me my first one through McGonagall." "Why would he give you a second identical broom?" Ron asked skeptically. "No idea," Harry said, carefully rewrapping the broomstick. "I'll ask McGonagall about it later." He understood the gift's purpose, though. After the jinxing incident, Snape wanted to ensure Harry had a backup broom if something happened to his primary Nimbus. It was a surprisingly thoughtful gift, and very like Snape to make it practical rather than frivolous. The last package was the most intriguing. Lightweight and wrapped in plain paper, it contained something fluid and silvery gray that slithered to the floor and lay in gleaming folds. Ron gasped. "I've heard of those," he said in a hushed voice. "If that's what I think it is, they're really rare, and really valuable." "What is it?" "It's an invisibility cloak," said Ron, with a look of awe on his face. "Try it on." Harry threw the cloak around his shoulders and looked down at his feet, or where his feet should have been. They were gone. He dashed to the mirror and saw only his head suspended in midair, his body completely invisible. "There's a note," said Ron suddenly. A note fell out of it. Harry pulled off the cloak and seized the letter. Written in narrow, loopy writing he had never seen before were the following words: "Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very happy Christmas to you." There was no signature. Harry stared at the note, emotions welling up inside him. Something that had belonged to his father, a family heirloom, passed down to him at last. "I'd give anything for one of these," Ron was saying, admiring the cloak. "Anything. What's the matter?" "Nothing," said Harry, his voice thick. He carefully folded the cloak, his mind racing. Whoever had sent this knew his father personally. Dumbledore, perhaps. Or maybe. Later that day, while Ron was distracted by a chess game with his brothers, Harry slipped away to Snape's office. The potions master looked surprised when Harry knocked. "I didn't expect to see you today," he said, closing the door behind Harry. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong," Harry said. I got some interesting gifts this morning." Snape raised an eyebrow. "Including a second nimbus, I presume?" Harry nodded. "Thank you. That was, really thoughtful." "Merely practical," Snape replied dismissively. After Quirrell's interference, it seemed prudent to have a backup. "I got something else too," Harry said, pulling the invisibility cloak from under his robes. "It belonged to my father." Snape went very still, his expression unreadable as Harry unfolded the silvery material. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly. "It came with a note saying my father left it with them before he died," Harry explained. "No signature." "Dumbledore," Snape said immediately. "He's had it all this time." "You knew about it?" Snape's lips pressed into a thin line. "Yes. Your father used it frequently during our school days. Often for mischief." Harry could hear the complex emotions behind Snape's carefully neutral tone. "Did he use it against you?" he asked softly. Snape was silent for a long moment. "Sometimes," he finally admitted. "Your father and I were not merely rivals, Harry. At times, our animosity ran much deeper." "I'm sorry," Harry said, meaning it. "I won't use it that way. I promise." Something in Snape's expression softened slightly. "I know you won't. You're not." He paused. "You're your own person, Harry. Not simply James Potter's son." The words meant more to Harry than Snape could possibly know. For years, he'd worried about living up to the legacy of parents he couldn't remember, especially knowing the complicated history between his father and the man who had raised him. "I'm going to use it well," Harry promised, echoing the note's instruction. "For emergencies, like the broom." Snape looked skeptical. "The temptation to use it for exploration and rule-breaking will be considerable," he noted dryly. "Particularly with Weasley as your confidant." Harry grinned. "Maybe a little exploration. But not rule-breaking." "Oomph." Snape clearly didn't believe him. "The cloak doesn't make you invincible, Harry. You can still be heard, still leave footprints, still bump into things. And Dumbledore can see through it." "He can. The headmaster has many unusual abilities," Snape said. "Never assume you're completely undetectable. Constant vigilance is essential, even with an invisibility cloak." Harry nodded seriously, tucking the advice away. "I should get back before Ron wonders where I've gone." "Enjoy your Christmas," Snape said, somewhat awkwardly. "And, thank you for coming to tell me about the cloak. It was appropriate that I know." As Harry turned to leave, Snape added, "One moment." He went to his desk, opened a drawer, and removed a small, wrapped package. "This is for you as well. Something more personal than a spare broomstick." Surprised, Harry unwrapped the package to find a handsome leather-bound journal. Opening it, he found the pages blank except for an inscription on the first page in Snape's precise handwriting, "For thoughts and observations too complex for conversation. Use it to organize your mind, and your magic will follow." It's charmed to be readable only to you, Snape explained. A useful skill for a young wizard is organizing one's thoughts. Recording observations, questions, theories, it strengthens mental discipline, which in turn strengthens magical control. "Thank you," Harry said, genuinely touched. "I'll use it every day." Snape inclined his head, looking slightly uncomfortable with Harry's evident emotion. "Yes, well. Off you go, before Weasley organizes a search party." Christmas dinner in the Great Hall was spectacular. 100 fat, roast turkeys, mountains of roast and boiled potatoes, platters of chipolatas, tureens of buttered peas, silver boats of thick, rich gravy and cranberry sauce, and stacks of wizard crackers every few feet along the table. Harry pulled a cracker with Fred Weasley and it went off with a blast like a cannon, engulfing them in a cloud of blue smoke and producing a rear admiral's hat and several live, white mice. At the high table, Dumbledore had swapped his pointed wizard's hat for a flowered bonnet and was chuckling at a joke Professor Flitwick had just read him. When Harry finally left the table, he was laden with things from the crackers, including a pack of luminous balloons, a grow-your-own-warts kit, and a new wizard chess set. The white mice had disappeared, and Harry had a nasty feeling they were going to end up as Mrs. Norris's Christmas dinner. Harry and the Weasleys spent the afternoon having a furious snowball fight in the grounds, returning to the common room wet, cold, and exhausted. After a meal of turkey sandwiches, crumpets, trifle, and Christmas cake, everyone felt too full and sleepy to do much before bed except sit and watch Percy chase Fred and George around the tower because they'd stolen his prefect badge. It had been the best Christmas of Harry's life, though he found himself missing the quiet celebrations he'd shared with Snape in previous years. Those had been simpler affairs, a special dinner, a few carefully chosen gifts, and long talks by the fire about magic and potions and Harry's mother. Different, but no less meaningful. That night, lying in his four-poster with the dormitory to himself, Neville, Seamus, and Dean had all gone home for the holidays, the invisibility cloak folded carefully in his trunk, Harry found himself opening the journal Snape had given him. "Christmas Day, first year at Hogwarts," he wrote. "Today I received my father's invisibility cloak and a journal from Professor Snape. 2 gifts from 2 different parts of my life, my past and my present. I wonder what my parents would think of how things turned out. Would they be happy that Professor Snape raised me? My mom probably would, they were friends once. My dad, that's more complicated. Professor Snape says I'm my own person, not just my father's son. I want to make both of them proud, though. My parents and Professor Snape. I think that means finding a balance between bravery and caution, between exploring and following rules. Tomorrow night I'm going to try out the invisibility cloak. I want to check the restricted section for information on Nicholas Flamel. That feels like a good balance, using my father's gift to learn, not just to break rules for fun. I wonder if the key to handling Quirrell/Voldemort is finding that same kind of balance." The next night, Harry wrapped the invisibility cloak around himself and crept out of the dormitory, down the stairs, across the common room, and climbed through the portrait hole. "Who's there?" squawked the fat lady, but Harry said nothing as he walked quickly down the corridor. The library was pitch black and very eerie. Harry lit a lamp to see his way along the rows of books. The lamp looked as if it was floating along in midair, and even though Harry could feel his arms supporting it, the sight gave him the creeps. The restricted section was right at the back of the library. Carefully stepping over the rope that separated these books from the rest of the library, Harry held up his lamp to read the titles. They didn't tell him much. Their peeling, faded gold letters spelled words in languages Harry couldn't understand. Some had no title at all. One book had a dark stain on it that looked horribly like blood. Harry knew he had to start somewhere. Setting his lamp down carefully on the floor, he looked along the bottom shelf for an interesting-looking book. A large black and silver volume caught his eye. He pulled it out with difficulty, balancing it on his knee, and let it fall open. A piercing, blood-curdling shriek split the silence. The book was screaming. Harry snapped it shut, but the shriek went on and on, one high, unbroken, ear-splitting note. He stumbled backward and knocked over his lamp, which went out at once. Panicking, he heard footsteps coming down the corridor outside. Stuffing the shrieking book back on the shelf, he ran for it. He passed Filch almost at the doorway. The caretaker's pale, wild eyes looked straight through him, and Harry slipped under Filch's outstretched arm and ran down the corridor. He came to a sudden halt in front of a tall suit of armor. He'd been so busy getting away from the library, he hadn't paid attention to where he was going. And now he had no idea where he was at all. "You asked me to come directly to you, Professor, if anyone was wandering around at night, and somebody's been in the library, restricted section." Harry's stomach sank. Wherever he was, Filch must know a shortcut, because his soft, greasy voice was getting nearer, and to Harry's horror, Snape replied, "The restricted section. Well, they can't be far, we'll catch them." Harry stood rooted to the spot as Filch and Snape came around the corner ahead. They couldn't see him, of course, but it was a narrow corridor, and if they came much closer they'd knock right into him. The cloak didn't stop him from being solid. He backed away as quietly as he could, seeking any escape route. A door stood ajar to his left. It was his only hope. He squeezed through it, holding his breath, trying not to move it, and to his relief managed to get inside without them noticing anything. They walked straight past, and Harry leaned against the wall, breathing deeply, listening to their footsteps dying away. It was a moment before he noticed anything about the room he had hidden in. It looked like an unused classroom. The dark shapes of desks and chairs were piled against the walls, and there was an upturned wastepaper basket, but propped against the wall facing him was something that didn't look as if it belonged there, something that looked as if someone had just put it there to keep it out of the way. It was a magnificent mirror, as high as the ceiling, with an ornate gold frame, standing on two clawed feet. There was an inscription carved around the top, "Erist stra eru oit ube kafru oit onwosi." His panic fading now that there was no sound of Filch and Snape, Harry moved nearer to the mirror, wanting to look at himself but see no reflection again. But when he stood in front of it, he had to clap his hands to his mouth to stop himself from screaming. For he saw not only himself in the mirror, but a whole crowd of people standing behind him. Harry looked over his shoulder, but there was no one there. He looked in the mirror again. A woman standing right behind his reflection was smiling at him and waving. He stared, transfixed. She had dark red hair and her eyes were just like his, bright green and exactly the same shape. She was crying, smiling at him through her tears. And the tall, thin, black-haired man standing next to her put his arm around her. He wore glasses, and his hair was very untidy. It stuck up at the back, just as Harry's did. His parents. It had to be. Harry stood, his nose pressed against the glass, as though he was hoping to fall right through it and reach them. He had a powerful kind of ache inside him, half joy, half terrible sadness. How long he stood there, he didn't know. The reflections didn't fade and he looked and looked until a distant noise brought him back to his senses. He couldn't stay here, he had to find his way back to bed. He tore his eyes away from his mother's face, whispered, "I'll come back," and hurried from the room. "You found what?" Snape's voice was sharp. They were in his office again, Harry having slipped down after breakfast, claiming he needed a book from the library. "A mirror that shows my parents," Harry repeated. "It's in an unused classroom not far from the library. The inscription at the top says, Erist stra eru oit ube kafru oit onwosi. Snape's expression darkened. "The mirror of Erist," he said grimly. "I should have known Dumbledore would move it here." "You know about it?" Harry asked eagerly. "What does it do, exactly? Why does it show me my parents?" It shows the deepest, most desperate desire of our hearts, Snape explained, his voice carefully neutral. For you, an orphan who never knew his parents, it shows them alive, with you. Harry absorbed this. So, it's not real. Not a window to the past or anything. No, Harry, Snape said gently. It's merely a reflection of your desires. Nothing more. What would you see in it? Harry asked, then immediately regretted the question when Snape's expression closed off completely. That's a highly personal question, Snape said coldly. Sorry, Harry said quickly. I'm going back tonight. To see them again. You will do no such thing, Snape said sharply. The mirror of Erist is dangerous, Harry. Men have wasted away before it, entranced by what they see, or been driven mad, not knowing if what it shows is real or even possible. Harry wanted to argue but was struck by the genuine concern in Snape's voice. But, it's my only chance to see them. To see what they really looked like. Snape was quiet for a long moment, seemingly engaged in some internal debate. Finally, he sighed. I have photographs, he said reluctantly. Of your mother, primarily, but some include your father as well. From our school days. Harry's heart leapt. You do. Could I see them? Not here, Snape said. They're at the cottage. I'll bring them after the holidays. He fixed Harry with a stern look. In exchange for your promise to stay away from the mirror. Deal, Harry said immediately. The chance to see real photographs of his parents was worth giving up the mirror's illusions. Why is the mirror here at Hogwarts, anyway? If it's so dangerous. The headmaster likely has his reasons, Snape said. Perhaps as an additional protection for the stone. Harry considered this. You think it's part of the defenses? Like Fluffy? It's possible, Snape conceded. The mirror's power could be harnessed or modified for specific purposes. Dumbledore is skilled at such adaptations of magical artifacts. If Quirrell is working for Voldemort, he might know about the mirror too, Harry said thoughtfully. Maybe that's why you caught him in the library, looking for information about it. Snape raised an eyebrow. A reasonable deduction. Though I suspect Professor Quirrell already knows what the mirror does. Its powers are documented in several advanced texts on magical artifacts. Harry nodded, filing this information away. Despite his promise to Snape not to go looking for trouble, he couldn't help gathering intelligence about the stone and its protections. Knowledge was power, after all, something Snape himself had taught him. Now, Snape said, checking the time, you should return to your common room before your absence is noted. And Harry, his voice softened slightly, I understand the temptation the mirror presents. But real memories, however limited, are worth more than endless gazing at an illusion. I know, Harry said quietly. Thanks for telling me about the photographs. I can wait. As he left Snape's office, Harry reflected on how much their relationship had evolved over the years. From reluctant guardian to genuine mentor, Snape had become someone Harry trusted implicitly, even when they disagreed. It was a strange balance, maintaining their public antagonism while preserving their private connection, but somehow they made it work. And now, with the mystery of the Philosopher's Stone and Quirrell's connection to Voldemort, that trust would be more important than ever. January brought a return to classes and a new intensity to Quidditch practice as Oliver Wood drove the Gryffindor team relentlessly in preparation for their upcoming match against Hufflepuff. Despite the increased workload, Harry, Ron, and Hermione continued their research on Nicholas Flamel. It was Hermione who finally found the answer, in a book she'd checked out weeks ago for light reading. I can't believe it, she whispered excitedly one evening in the common room. I checked this out ages ago for background reading, and I only just remembered to look in it. She pushed the massive old book toward them, pointing to a passage. The ancient study of alchemy is concerned with making the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary substance with astonishing powers. The stone will transform any metal into pure gold. It also produces the elixir of life, which will make the drinker immortal. There have been many reports of the philosopher's stone over the centuries, but the only stone currently in existence belongs to Mr. Nicholas Flamel, the noted alchemist and opera lover. Mr. Flamel, who celebrated his 665th birthday last year, enjoys a quiet life in Devon with his wife, Perenelle, 658. "See," said Hermione. "The dog must be guarding Flamel's philosopher's stone. I bet he asked Dumbledore to keep it safe for him, because they're friends and he knew someone was after it. That's why Flamel's name sounded familiar." "A stone that makes gold and stops you from ever dying," said Ron. "No wonder someone's after it. Anyone would want it." Harry nodded, feigning surprise while feeling relieved that he could now openly discuss the stone with his friends without revealing that Snape had already told him about it. "And no wonder we couldn't find Flamel in that study of recent developments in wizardry," said Ron. "He's not exactly recent if he's 665, is he?" "So now we know what the dog's guarding," Harry said, "but that doesn't tell us who's trying to steal it." Hermione leaned in, lowering her voice. "I've been watching Quirrell, like you suggested. He does spend a lot of time alone, and I've noticed he mutters to himself when he thinks no one's watching." "See?" Harry said to Ron. "Told you he was suspicious." "But he seems so pathetic," Ron argued, though with less conviction than before. "And what would you know who want with someone like Quirrell?" "A perfect disguise," Hermione pointed out. "No one would suspect him." Harry nodded. "Exactly what I've been saying. Plus, who better to help steal the stone than the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher? He'd know all the counter curses and protective spells. So what do we do now?" Ron asked. "Tell Dumbledore our suspicions." "Without proof." Hermione shook her head. "We need more evidence." Harry thought of Snape's warnings. "Maybe we should just keep watching for now," he suggested. "As long as Quirrell can't get past Fluffy and the other protections, the stone is safe." "I suppose," Ron agreed reluctantly. "But if he makes a move, we've got to act fast." "Agreed," said Harry, privately hoping it wouldn't come to that. Despite his confidence in his own abilities, he knew Snape was right. He wasn't ready to face Voldemort, even a weakened version sharing Quirrell's body. In the weeks that followed, Harry divided his attention between classes, Quidditch, monitoring Quirrell's activities, and his occasional private meetings with Snape. As promised, the potions master had brought a small album of photographs from the cottage, mostly of Lily, but with a few that included James as well. "She was beautiful," Harry said softly, tracing his mother's smiling face with his finger. They were in Snape's office, the photographs spread on his desk. "You can really see where I got my eyes." "Your mother's most distinctive feature," Snape agreed, his own gaze lingering on Lily's image. "She was extraordinarily kind, as well. Quick to defend others, even at cost to herself." Harry looked up. "Is that how you became friends? She defended you?" Snape's expression grew distant. "In a manner of speaking. We met before Hogwarts. I was the one who told her she was a witch, actually. I'd seen her doing accidental magic in the park near our homes." "Really?" Harry was fascinated. "What kind of magic?" "She could make flowers open and close their petals," Snape recalled, a rare softness entering his voice. "And once, when her sister teased her, she leapt from a swing and floated to the ground like a leaf." Harry tried to imagine his mother as a small girl, discovering her powers, meeting the young Severus Snape. "You must have been friends for a long time." "Nearly 7 years," Snape confirmed. "Until..." He stopped abruptly. "Until what happened between you?" Harry asked cautiously. It was a subject they'd never fully discussed, though Harry had gathered over the years that something serious had ended Snape and his mother's friendship. Snape was silent for a long moment. "I made an unforgivable mistake," he finally said. "I called her a derogatory term for Muggleborns. In a moment of humiliation and anger, after your father and his friends had been tormenting me." His voice hardened. "It doesn't excuse what I said." "Nothing could. But that was the end of our friendship." Harry absorbed this, troubled by the revelation but also touched by Snape's honesty. "But you still loved her," he said quietly. "Even afterward." Snape's head snapped up, his eyes widening slightly at Harry's perception. "I cared for her deeply," he said carefully. "We were never reconciled before her death. It remains my greatest regret." "That's why you've done all this," Harry realized. "Taking care of me, protecting me. It's how you're making amends to her." "Initially, perhaps," Snape admitted. "But over time." He seemed to struggle with the words. "Over time, my reasons became more complex." It was as close as Snape had ever come to admitting he cared for Harry himself, not just as Lily's son or a responsibility. Harry felt a warm glow of affection for this complicated man who'd rescued him from the Dursleys and given him a real home, however unconventional. "Thank you," he said simply. "For the photographs. And for telling me the truth." Snape nodded curtly, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional turn of the conversation. "You should keep these," he said, indicating the photographs. "They belong with you." Harry carefully gathered the precious images. "I'll guard them with my life," he promised. "See that you do," Snape replied, his usual briskness returning. "Now, update me on Quirrell's activities. Have you noticed anything suspicious?" The Gryffindor-Hufflepuff Quidditch match approached rapidly. Harry was relieved to learn that Snape would be refereeing, a fact that horrified Ron and Hermione until Harry quietly assured them it was a good thing. "Trust me," he whispered. "Snape won't let anything happen to me. He's doing this to protect me from Quirrell." "Are you mad?" Ron hissed. "Snape hates you. And he'll be totally unfair to Gryffindor." "I know what I'm talking about," Harry insisted. "Just trust me on this." Though skeptical, his friends reluctantly agreed. On the day of the match, Harry mounted his broom with confidence, knowing Snape would be watching closely for any sign of interference from Quirrell. The match was over almost before it began. Determined to end it quickly and give Quirrell minimal opportunity to jinx his broom, Harry spotted the snitch within 5 minutes and executed a spectacular dive to capture it. The game ended with Gryffindor's victory, and Snape looking thoroughly annoyed, though Harry caught the brief glint of approval in the potion's master's eyes as he awarded the winning points with obvious reluctance. Later that evening, as Harry returned from storing his broomstick in the team shed, he spotted a hooded figure hurrying down the front steps of the castle. The figure moved with a distinctive gait that Harry immediately recognized as Snape's. What was he doing, sneaking out of the castle at dusk? Curiosity overwhelming caution, Harry jumped back on his nimbus and took off, flying silently over the castle walls. He saw Snape entering the Forbidden Forest, and followed at a safe distance, eventually hovering above a clearing where Snape had stopped. To Harry's surprise, Quirrell was already there, stuttering and trembling as usual. Harry descended carefully onto the branch of a large beech tree, straining to hear their conversation. "Don't know why you wanted TT to meet here of all places, Severus." "Oh, I thought we'd keep this private," said Snape, his voice icy. "Students aren't supposed to know about the Philosopher's Stone, after all." Harry leaned forward. Quirrell was mumbling something inaudible. "Have you found out how to get past that beast of Hagrid's yet?" Snape demanded. But Severus, you don't want me as your enemy, Quirrell," said Snape, taking a step toward him. I don't know what you know perfectly well what I mean. Your little bit of hocus pocus. I'm waiting." But I don't." "Very well," Snape cut in. "We'll have another little chat soon, when you've had time to think things over and decided where your loyalties lie." Snape threw his cloak over his head and strode out of the clearing. It was almost dark now, but Harry could see Quirrell, standing quite still as though petrified. Heart racing, Harry flew back to the castle, his mind whirling with what he'd witnessed. Snape was confronting Quirrell directly, trying to determine how much the defense professor knew about the stone's protections. It was bold, perhaps even dangerous, if Quirrell truly was hosting Voldemort. Harry headed straight for Snape's office, knocking urgently. When the door opened, Snape looked momentarily surprised to see him. "I followed you," Harry said without preamble once the door was closed and warded. "To the forest. I saw you talking to Quirrell." Snape's expression darkened. "That was reckless and foolish. What if you had been seen?" "I was careful," Harry insisted. "I used my broom and stayed hidden." "But that's not important, you confronted Quirrell directly. Isn't that dangerous if he's really working with Voldemort?" "I know what I'm doing," Snape said coldly. "Quirrell is unaware that I suspect his passenger. He believes I merely suspect him of conventional treachery. But why confront him at all? Won't that just make him more careful?" "Precisely," Snape said. "More careful, more nervous, more likely to make mistakes. Additionally, I needed to assess how much he knows about the stone's protections." Harry frowned. "And? Does he know how to get past Fluffy?" "I believe not, yet," Snape replied. "But he's working on it." Hagrid's fondness for dangerous creatures and loose tongue are a troubling combination. "You think Hagrid might accidentally tell him?" "It's a possibility we can't dismiss," Snape confirmed grimly. "Hagrid is loyal but not always discreet. Particularly when his guard is lowered." Harry understood the implication. "You mean if someone got him drunk or something?" "Precisely." Harry thought quickly. "We should warn him. Tell him not to talk about Fluffy to anyone." "The headmaster has already cautioned him," Snape said. "But an additional warning from a friend might reinforce the message." "I'll talk to him tomorrow," Harry promised. "Make it sound casual, just checking that he's being careful." Snape nodded approvingly. "A sensible approach. Now, you should return to your dormitory before curfew. And Harry," his voice hardened slightly, "no more following me. The forest is dangerous, and your involvement in this matter should remain minimal." "But I'm already involved," Harry pointed out. "Voldemort's after me as much as he's after the stone." "All the more reason to maintain a safe distance," Snape countered. "Let the faculty handle this, Harry. Please." The "please" caught Harry's attention. Snape rarely used the word, and never lightly. "All right," he conceded. "I'll be careful. But keep me informed, okay?" Snape sighed. "As much as is prudent, yes." The following day, Harry, Ron, and Hermione visited Hagrid's hut, ostensibly to congratulate him on the dragon egg he'd recently acquired. Harry had been alarmed to learn of this development. Keeping a dragon was illegal, not to mention dangerous and impractical, but it provided the perfect opening to discuss Fluffy. "Where'd you get it, Hagrid?" said Ron, crouching over the large, black egg in the fire. "It must have cost you a fortune." "Won it," said Hagrid. "Last night. I was down in the village having a few drinks and got into a game o' cards with a stranger. Think he was quite glad to get rid of it, to be honest." "But what are you going to do when it hatches?" said Hermione. "Well, I've been doin' some readin'," said Hagrid, pulling a large book from under his pillow. "Got this out of the library, Dragon Breeding for Pleasure and Profit. It's a bit out of date, course, but it's all in here." As Hagrid happily explained his plans for raising the Norwegian Ridgeback, Harry exchanged concerned glances with Ron and Hermione. This was exactly the kind of situation Snape had warned about. Hagrid, excited about a dangerous creature, potentially dropping his guard with a suspicious stranger. "Did you tell the stranger what kind of creatures you look after at Hogwarts?" Harry asked casually. I bet he was interested in that. "Well, yeah," said Hagrid. "He asked what I did, and I told him I was gamekeeper here. He asked a bit about the sort of creatures I look after, so I told him, and I said what I'd always really wanted was a dragon, and then I can't remember too well, 'cause he kept buying me drinks. Let's see, yeah, then he said he had the dragon egg and we could play cards ferret if I wanted, but he had to be sure I could handle it, he didn't want it to go to any old home. So I told him, after Fluffy, a dragon would be easy. And did he seem interested in Fluffy? Harry asked, trying to sound casual. Well, yeah, how many three-headed dogs do you meet, even around Hogwarts? So I told him, Fluffy's a piece o' cake if you know how to calm him down, just play him a bit o' music and he'll go straight off ter sleep. Hagrid suddenly looked horrified. I shouldn't ha' told ya that. Forget I said it. Hey, where are you going? Harry, Ron, and Hermione didn't speak until they had reached the entrance hall. We've got to tell Dumbledore, said Harry. Hagrid told that stranger how to get past Fluffy, and it was either Quirrell or Voldemort under that cloak. It must have been easy, once he'd got Hagrid drunk. I just hope Dumbledore believes us. Where's his office? Before they could decide on their next move, Professor McGonagall came walking across the hall, carrying a large pile of books. We want to see Professor Dumbledore, said Hermione bravely. See Professor Dumbledore? Professor McGonagall repeated, as though this was a very unusual request. Why? It's sort of secret, said Harry, immediately wishing he hadn't as McGonagall's nostrils flared. Professor Dumbledore left 10 minutes ago, she said coldly. He received an urgent owl from the Ministry of Magic and flew off for London at once. He's gone, said Harry frantically. Now. Professor Dumbledore is a very great wizard, Potter, he has many demands on his time, but this is important. Something you have to say is more important than the Ministry of Magic, Potter. Look, said Harry, throwing caution to the winds, Professor, it's about the Philosopher's Stone. Whatever Professor McGonagall had expected, it wasn't that. The books she was carrying tumbled out of her arms, but she didn't pick them up. How do you know? She spluttered. Professor, I know, that someone's going to try and steal the stone. I've got to talk to Professor Dumbledore. She eyed him with a mixture of shock and suspicion. Professor Dumbledore will be back tomorrow, she said finally. I don't know how you found out about the stone, but rest assured, no one can possibly steal it, it's too well protected. But Professor Potter, I know what I'm talking about, she said shortly, bending down to gather her books. I suggest you all go back outside and enjoy the sunshine. But they didn't. It's tonight, said Harry once McGonagall was out of earshot. Quirrell's going to try and steal the stone tonight. He sent that fake message to get Dumbledore away. Harry hesitated, then made a decision. I need to warn Professor Snape. Ron and Hermione looked at him as if he'd gone mad. Snape? Ron spluttered. Why in Merlin's name would you tell Snape? Because he's been trying to protect the stone from Quirrell all along, Harry said firmly. Trust me on this. I know things you don't. Like what? Hermione demanded. Harry hesitated. He'd kept his true relationship with Snape secret for so long, but now, with the stone in imminent danger, perhaps it was time for partial honesty. Snape knew my mother, he said finally. They were friends before Hogwarts. He's been looking out for me, in his way. The whole hating me thing is an act, to keep certain people from getting suspicious. Ron gaped at him. You're mental. Completely mental. It's true, Harry insisted. Look, there's no time to explain everything, but please, just trust me. Snape is on our side. Hermione studied his face intently. You're serious, aren't you? She said slowly. There's history here you haven't told us. Yes, Harry admitted. And I'll explain everything later, I promise. But right now, we need to warn Snape that Quirrell knows how to get past Fluffy. After a moment's hesitation, Hermione nodded. All right. Let's find him. They hurried down to the dungeons, but Snape's office was empty. A hesitant question to a passing Slytherin prefect revealed that the potions master had been called away to deal with an issue in Hogsmeade, another convenient absence, Harry thought grimly. Someone's clearing the path, he said as they huddled in an empty classroom. First Dumbledore, now Snape. I bet McGonagall and the other teachers will be distracted too. So what do we do? Asked Ron. We go after the stone ourselves, said Harry. Tonight. But the protections, Hermione began. We can handle them, Harry said confidently. We've got your brains, Hermione, Ron's strategic thinking, and, he hesitated, then continued, and I've been trained for this kind of thing. More than you know. His friends looked at him with renewed curiosity, but Harry shook his head. Later, he promised. I'll explain everything later. First, we need a plan. That night, Harry, Ron, and Hermione slipped out of Gryffindor Tower under the invisibility cloak. They encountered Neville in the common room, attempting to stop them from breaking more rules and losing more house points, but Hermione reluctantly used a full bodybind curse on him, promising silently to make it up to him later. Their journey to the third-floor corridor was tense but uneventful. When they reached the door to Fluffy's chamber, it was already ajar. Well, there you are, Harry said quietly. Quirrell's already past Fluffy. He pulled out the wooden flute Hagrid had given him for Christmas and began to play. It wasn't a tune, but from the first note, Fluffy's eyes began to droop. Harry kept playing as Ron and Hermione cautiously approached the trapdoor. I can see a way down, Ron whispered, but I can't see the bottom. Who's going first? I will, said Harry, passing the flute to Hermione, who continued playing. He climbed over Fluffy's massive paws and peered into the dark opening. Then he lowered himself through the hole until he was hanging by his fingertips. He looked up at Ron and nodded, then let go. Cold, damp air rushed past him as he fell, landing with a muffled thump on something soft. He sat up and felt around, his eyes not yet used to the dark. It's okay, he called up. It's a soft landing, you can jump. Ron followed, landing beside Harry. What is this stuff? He asked, feeling the strange, plant-like substance beneath them. Before Harry could answer, Hermione landed on his other side, the flute's music cutting off abruptly as she fell. In the distance, they heard Fluffy barking again, but it was too late to turn back now. We must be miles under the school, Hermione said, looking around. Lucky this plant thing's here, really, said Ron. Lucky? Shrieked Hermione. Look at you both. She leapt up and struggled toward a damp wall. Harry and Ron looked down to see tendrils of the plant wrapping themselves tightly around their legs. Hermione had managed to free herself before it could get a firm grip on her, but the boys were already trapped. It's Devil's Snare! Hermione cried. Stop moving. I remember reading about it in herbology, it likes the dark and damp, so light a fire. Harry choked as the plant began to twist around his chest. Yes, of course, but there's no wood. Hermione cried, wringing her hands. Have you gone mad? Ron bellowed. Are you a witch or not? Oh, right, said Hermione. She whipped out her wand, waved it, muttered something, and sent a jet of bluebell flames at the plant. In seconds, Harry and Ron felt it loosening its grip as it cringed away from the light and warmth. Lucky you pay attention in herbology, Hermione, said Harry as he joined her by the wall, wiping sweat from his face. Yeah, said Ron, and lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in a crisis, there's no wood, honestly. They followed the only available path, a stone passageway that sloped downward. The next chamber contained a room full of glittering, winged keys, with broomsticks propped against the wall. After identifying the key they needed, old-fashioned, silver, with a bent wing from being caught once already, Harry used his seeker skills to capture it. The following room presented a giant wizard's chess set, which Ron navigated brilliantly, sacrificing himself in a knight's move that allowed Harry to checkmate the opposing king. With Ron unconscious but stable, Harry and Hermione pressed on, facing Snape's logical puzzle of potions to pass through flames. "Brilliant," said Hermione as she read the parchment containing the clues. "This isn't magic, it's logic, a puzzle. Most wizards haven't got an ounce of logic, they'd be stuck in here forever." "But so will we, won't we?" Harry asked anxiously. "No," said Hermione, rereading the parchment. "Everything we need is here. 7 bottles, 3 are poison, 2 are wine, 1 will get us safely through the black fire, and 1 will get us back through the purple." She worked through the clues methodically, eventually identifying a small bottle that would allow passage forward and a rounded bottle that would permit return through the flames. "There's only enough for 1 person in the forward potion," Hermione observed worriedly. "Barely enough for you." Harry looked at the tiny bottle. "You drink the other one," he said. "Go back, get Ron, grab brooms from the key room, and fly out. Send an owl to Dumbledore, use Hedwig, she's fastest. And..." He hesitated, "try to find Snape. Tell him where I am." "But Harry, what if you know who's with Quirrell?" "Well, I was lucky once, wasn't I?" said Harry, pointing at his scar. "I might get lucky again." Hermione's lip trembled, and she suddenly dashed at Harry and threw her arms around him. "Harry, you're a great wizard, you know." "Not as good as you," said Harry, embarrassed. "Me?" said Hermione. "Books. And cleverness. There are more important things, friendship and bravery and, oh Harry, be careful." "You drink first," said Harry. "Go, before the potion wears off." Hermione took a swig from the rounded bottle and shuddered. "It's like ice," she said. Then she walked straight through the purple flames. Harry took a deep breath and picked up the smallest bottle. He turned to face the black flames, drained the potion in one gulp, and stepped forward. For a moment, all he could see was black fire. Then he was on the other side, in the final chamber. And he wasn't alone. Quirrell stood before the mirror of Eriste, examining it intently. He turned when Harry entered, smiling without a trace of his usual stutter. "I wondered whether I'd be meeting you here, Potter," he said coolly. "Can't say I'm surprised to see you," Harry replied, keeping his voice steady. "Though I am disappointed you're not still pretending to stutter." Quirrell laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "Yes, quite a performance, wasn't it? Who would suspect P.P. Poor, St. Stuttering P. Professor Quirrell?" "Snape suspected," Harry said. "He's been on to you from the start." "Yes, Severus," Quirrell said thoughtfully. "Always swooping around like an overgrown bat. He does make a convenient villain, doesn't he? Next to him, who would suspect me?" "So what now?" Harry asked, stalling for time, hoping Hermione had reached Dumbledore or Snape. "You can't get the stone out of the mirror, can you?" Quirrell frowned. "I see myself presenting the stone to my master, but I cannot obtain it. Is it inside the mirror? Should I break it?" Harry's mind raced. He remembered Snape's theory about the mirror being part of the stone's defenses. Perhaps Dumbledore had enchanted it so that only someone who wanted to find the stone, but not use it, could retrieve it. "Use the boy," came a high, cold voice that seemed to emanate from Quirrell himself. "Use the boy." Quirrell rounded on Harry. "Yes, Potter, come here." He clapped his hands, and ropes sprang out of thin air, wrapping themselves tightly around Harry. "Look in the mirror and tell me what you see." Harry was forced before the mirror of Eriste. He closed his eyes briefly, centering himself with the meditation technique Snape had taught him years ago. He needed to see through the mirror's enchantment, to understand how it had been modified to protect the stone. Opening his eyes, he looked into the glass. His reflection stared back at him, pale but determined. Then it smiled, reached into its pocket, and pulled out a blood-red stone. His reflection winked and put the stone back in its pocket, and as it did so, Harry felt something heavy drop into his real pocket. Somehow, incredibly, he'd gotten the stone. "Well?" said Quirrell impatiently. What do you see? Harry called on every occlumency lesson Snape had ever given him, building a simple shield around the truth. I see myself shaking hands with Dumbledore, he lied. I've won the House Cup for Gryffindor. Quirrell cursed. Get out of the way, he said, shoving Harry aside. As Harry fell, he felt the ropes binding him loosen. The stone was in his pocket. If he could just keep Quirrell distracted and make it back to the flames. He lies. He lies. Came that terrible voice again. Potter, come back here. Quirrell shouted. Tell me the truth. What did you just see? The high voice spoke again. Let me speak to him, face to face. Master, you are not strong enough. I have strength enough, for this. Harry watched, frozen in horror, as Quirrell unwrapped his turban. Where there should have been the back of his head, there was a face, the most terrible face Harry had ever seen. Chalk white with glaring red eyes and slits for nostrils, like a snake. Harry Potter. It whispered. See what I have become. Mere shadow and vapor. I have form only when I can share another's body, but there have always been those willing to let me into their hearts and minds. Unicorn blood has strengthened me, these past weeks. Once I have the elixir of life, I will be able to create a body of my own. Now, why don't you give me that stone in your pocket? So he knew. Harry scrambled backward, his hand closing around the stone. Don't be a fool, snarled the face. Better save your own life and join me, or you'll meet the same end as your parents. They died begging me for mercy. Liar. Harry shouted suddenly. My mother died to protect me. Snape had told him the truth years ago, how Lily had stood between Voldemort and her baby, how her sacrifice had created the protection that saved Harry. Quirrell was walking backward toward him, so that Voldemort could still see Harry. The evil face was now smiling. How touching. It hissed. I always value bravery. Yes, boy, your parents were brave. I killed your father first, and he put up a courageous fight, but your mother needn't have died, she was trying to protect you. Now give me the stone, unless you want her to have died in vain. Never. Harry sprang for the flame door, but Quirrell was quicker. He seized Harry's wrist, and at once, a needle-sharp pain seared across Harry's scar. His head felt as though it would split in two. To his astonishment, Quirrell released him, howling in agony. Master, I cannot hold him, my hands, my hands. Harry looked at Quirrell's hands and saw they were blistering before his eyes, the flesh red and raw. Then kill him, fool, and be done, screeched Voldemort. Quirrell raised his wand, but Harry, acting on instinct, lunged forward and pressed his hands against Quirrell's face. The defense professor screamed, his skin blistering wherever Harry touched him. Understanding flooded Harry, Quirrell couldn't touch him without suffering terrible pain. His mother's protection lived on in his skin. He pressed forward, grabbing Quirrell's arm, hanging on as tight as he could while the man shrieked in agony. The pain in Harry's scar was blinding him, yet he held on, even as his vision tunneled and darkness closed in. The last thing he heard was Quirrell's terrible screams, Voldemort's yells of, "Kill him! Kill him!" and then, another voice, a familiar voice shouting his name with genuine fear, "Harry!" Then everything went black. Harry drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he thought he heard voices, Dumbledore's, calm and reassuring, Madame Pomfrey's, brisk and professional, and once, he was almost certain, Snape's, low and urgent. When he finally opened his eyes properly, he found himself in the hospital wing. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and at the foot of his bed sat Albus Dumbledore, smiling gently. "Good afternoon, Harry," he said. Harry stared at him, memories flooding back. "Sir. The stone. It was Quirrell. He's got the stone." "Calm yourself, dear boy, you are a little behind the times," said Dumbledore. "Quirrell does not have the stone." "Then who does?" "Sir, I, Harry, please relax, or Madame Pomfrey will have me thrown out. Harry swallowed and looked around. His bedside table was piled high with what looked like half the candy shop. "Tokens from your friends and admirers," said Dumbledore, beaming. "What happened down in the dungeons between you and Professor Quirrell is a complete secret, so, naturally, the whole school knows." As Dumbledore explained how he had arrived just in time to pull Quirrell off Harry, how the stone had been destroyed with Nicholas Flamel's consent, and how Harry's mother's protection had prevented Voldemort from touching him, Harry's mind worked furiously, connecting pieces. "And sir, there's something else." He hesitated. "When I looked in the mirror of Eriste at Christmas, I saw my parents. But Professor Snape said men have wasted away before it, so I stopped going." Was he right? Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly. "Professor Snape advised you about the mirror?" Harry realized his slip. "I mentioned seeing it, during detention," he improvised. "He warned me to stay away." "I see," said Dumbledore, though his penetrating blue eyes suggested he saw perhaps more than Harry intended. Professor Snape was quite correct. The mirror is indeed dangerous. It has now been removed to a new home. "Sir," Harry said carefully, "there's something else I've been wondering. Voldemort said he only killed my mother because she tried to stop him from killing me. But why did he want to kill me in the first place?" Dumbledore sighed deeply. "Alas, the first question you ask me, I cannot answer. Not today. Not now. You will know, one day, when you are ready." Harry accepted this reluctantly. "And sir, one more thing, how did I get the stone out of the mirror?" "Ah, now, I'm glad you asked me that. It was one of my more brilliant ideas, and between you and me, that's saying something. You see, only one who wanted to find the stone, find it, but not use it, would be able to get it. My brain surprises even me sometimes." They talked a while longer about Ron and Hermione's recovery, about house points, and about Voldemort's continued existence as less than a ghost. Finally, Madame Pomfrey shooed Dumbledore out, insisting Harry needed rest. But Harry had barely closed his eyes when he heard the hospital wing door open again. Opening them slightly, he saw a tall, black-robed figure approaching his bed, moving silently across the room. Snape. The potions master stood beside Harry's bed, studying him intently, apparently believing him to be asleep. The harsh lines of his face had softened slightly, and in his eyes, Harry could see something that, on anyone else, might have been called fear. Or relief. "Foolish, reckless child," Snape murmured, so quietly Harry barely caught the words. "You could have been killed." Harry opened his eyes fully. "But I wasn't," he whispered. Snape stiffened, his expression closing off immediately. "You're supposed to be resting, Potter," he said coolly, loud enough that Madame Pomfrey would hear if she were nearby. Harry understood. Even here, they needed to maintain appearances. "Sorry, sir," he said. Then, more quietly, "Thank you for coming." Snape gave a barely perceptible nod. "You handled yourself, adequately," he said, his voice still carrying the expected bite, but his eyes conveying a different message. "For a first year facing a fully qualified wizard." "I had a good teacher," Harry replied softly. Something flickered in Snape's eyes, pride, perhaps, or satisfaction. "Rest, Potter," he said, his tone marginally gentler. "We will discuss this further when you're recovered." He turned to leave, then paused, reaching into his robes. "I believe this is yours," he said, placing Harry's journal on the bedside table. "I took the liberty of retrieving it from your dormitory. I thought you might wish to record your observations about recent events." "Thank you," Harry said, genuinely touched. The journal had become important to him over the past months, a place to sort through his thoughts, as Snape had suggested. Snape inclined his head slightly, then swept from the room, his robes billowing behind him. As the door closed, Harry reached for the journal, opening it to a blank page. "First year at Hogwarts," he wrote. I faced Voldemort and survived. Again. But this time, I wasn't alone. I had Ron and Hermione. I had Dumbledore arriving at the end. And I had Snape, not directly there, but with me all the same, through everything he's taught me over the years. I think my mum would be proud. Not just of me, but of him too. For keeping his promise. For protecting me, even from my own recklessness. And maybe, someday, I'll be able to tell Ron and Hermione the truth about everything. About how Snape rescued me from the Dursleys. About how he taught me about magic and my parents. About how, in his own strange way, he's been more of a father to me than anyone. But for now, it's our secret. And somehow, that makes it special. Next year will be different. I'll be more prepared, more careful. Voldemort is still out there, and he'll try again. But I won't be facing him alone. I never was. As he closed the journal, Harry felt an unexpected sense of peace. His first year at Hogwarts had been dangerous, confusing, and at times frightening. But it had also confirmed what he'd begun to believe during his years with Snape, that he wasn't just the boy who lived, a walking target for Voldemort, but Harry, just Harry. A boy with friends who cared for him, teachers who protected him, and a complex, difficult guardian who had kept his promise to a woman he'd loved, and in doing so, had changed both their lives forever. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and Harry had no doubt there would be many, he would face them with the knowledge, skills, and confidence Snape had helped him build. And perhaps most importantly, with the understanding that protection came in many forms, not all of them obvious or easy to recognize. Sometimes, it looked like a scowling potions master, taking points from Gryffindor while secretly watching over a green-eyed boy who reminded him, every day, of his greatest mistake and his most profound redemption. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.